I don't want to die yet. The city night wasn't dark so much as washed out, neon and LED bleeding into the drizzle. Bai Luan sat on a cold bench by the curb, his back against a stiff metal rail, his face the washed-out gray of someone who hadn't slept and hadn't eaten properly in months. Traffic lights reflected in his eyes, but his thoughts traced the 20-odd years behind him. Parents gone young, grandparents who raised him then left, soon after. He'd thrown himself into work in the big city like every other kid with nothing to lose. Long hours, too few holidays, a stubborn optimism that he could make something of himself. He loved little things, helping friends, being responsible, and when he had spare time, sinking into Honkai, Star Rail. As a reward for his optimism and hard work, fate handed him late-stage liver cancer. He stared up at a giant screen on a building as a Heita poster flashed across it. If only he had been in that world, surely a disease like this would be curable there, right? A bitter laugh escaped him. Wishful thinking. Pain folded through his body like cold knives. He felt exhausted, numb, and unbearably young to be so tired of living. I don't want to die yet. On the public bench, he closed his eyes, and somewhere between the traffic and the rain, his heart finally gave out. When he opened his eyes again, there was no pain. There was nothing at all, just an endless, blinding white. A voice came from nowhere. Do you want to live another life in another world? Yes. Then let's go. At Herta's house, a different kind of spectacle was unfolding. She'd been taking an evening stroll through her rooms when space in front of her twisted tiny at first like a ripple. Cells blinked into being where there had been nothing. They multiplied, quickly organizing from microscopic patterns into flesh and bone, assembling into a human outline. Herta stopped, more curious than alarmed. Watching a body be constructed from the cellular level was not an everyday occurrence. What kind of person would emerge? Such a complete construction process. Interesting specimen, she murmured. Right now your body is being built in the Honkai, Star Rail world, a voice said to Bai Luan. While this happens, I'll explain my origin. You systems have origin stories? Bai Luan asked aloud. You can call me a system for convenience, the voice answered, but we are actually a high-dimensional life form. We recently received an emotional module and are still learning to use it. You're an organism? We're mass-produced, actually. There's a whole batch of us. Surprised? You talk like a person, Bai Luan said, and you have emotions? That stereotype about systems being emotionless is outdated. Before the Great Reformer made us accept emotional modules, we were as you imagine. Now, well, we're more expressive. This system sounded oddly human. Enough small talk. I chose you as an observation sample and gave you a chance to restart your life because of an assignment my mentor set me. Why should we revere life? The system continued. Bai Luan snorted. Do systems have academic pressure now? We do, in our own way, but we can fudge data if necessary. You sound like a college student pretending to be a system. Fair enough. The voice cleared. I picked you because someone who's faced death, like with your cancer, should have a deeper appreciation for life. I will observe your life in the Honkai Star Rail world and use what I learned to answer my assignment. So, I get a free resurrection? Bai Luan said, incredulous. Yes, no ads, no typing 1 to continue. How does it feel to be resurrected like the boss? Bai Luan sat up straighter, suddenly earnest. I should kneel and kowtow to you, honestly. Don't be dramatic, the system said. We're just doing our job. To help you live well, I've given you 2 aids. First, the little black room, infinite practice time. When you enter it, external time stops. Whatever you practice there won't count against your real lifespan. Second, the curio forger. Anything you craft can be converted into a curio. The better the item you make, the stronger the curio's ability. Bai Luan mulled that over. So I could get punched, jump into the little black room, train until I'm a martial master, then pop back out and kick the enemy's teeth in? You could learn techniques instantaneously in your head, but your physical body in the real world won't automatically grow stronger. You can't become an emanator just by learning. I can grant you emanator power. Hell, I could make you an Aeon, but that's a bad idea. Someone without a path who suddenly becomes an Aeon draws attention from all the Aeons and risks being rejected by this world. You've done that before? Bai Luan asked. Yes, multiple times. Some of them became breeding stock, toiling away. Others became tyrants who turned power into corruption. A few ungrateful ones tried to plot against me after I gave them everything. My mentors scolded me for their behavior, and I handled the problem, killed them with a thought, and reset their universes. Bai Luan's breath caught. So you're basically omnipotent. Not that dramatic, the system said flatly. Everything you can imagine, I can do, including granting path and aeon powers. But two reasons I won't. It doesn't help my assignment, and it's too much trouble. Think of an ant. You wouldn't pamper it. At most, you'd fling it a sugar cube. I'll help if you show value. Emotional value is fine. Emotional value. Bai Luan tried not to laugh at the absurdity of a cosmic being that cared about feelings. He imagined his young self handing out natural disasters to ants rather than sugar cubes. Best the system wasn't studying human misery then. Your body is almost finished, the system said. Time to send you over. Bai Luan felt a sudden falling sensation, the kind that makes your stomach flip. What a falling feeling. Last life I thought I died by falling off a roof. He flipped onto his back and sat up like a startled carp, then glanced at his hands and blinked. They looked smaller than he remembered. Why are my hands so tiny? Oh, right. To help you adapt to the Honkai, Star Rail world, I made some modifications and reduced your apparent age. Your original body had more illnesses than I care to list. That voice, familiar and amused, entered his ears. You're awake, little one. He looked up. Heita was standing over him, amusement sharpening into the precise interest she always reserved for curiosities. You were constructed from nothing by a mysterious force right in front of me, she said. You'd better prove you're not Abundance's spawn, or for the sake of science I'll dissect you. No, of all the things to be his first task after transmigrating, convincing a genius with a scalpel not to cut him up, this was the most terrifying. He scrambled for words that might keep him intact. He's aha! He's aha! At that moment, Bai Luan's mind was racing. He needed a plausible explanation for his absurd appearance, and the girl standing before him was none other than the famous Heita, the 83rd member of the Genius Society, twice an Aeon's guest, the girl who had saved the Azure Star from 19 catastrophes, who'd been called a magical girl genius and even patted her own chest. Trying to weave an airtight lie in front of her felt impossible. Then an idea struck him. He could use the information advantage of a transmigrator and pretend to be a prophet. I know the future developments of Honkai, Star Rail, he thought. That could be his greatest leverage. To be frank, Miss Heita. Bai Luan slowly rose and dusted himself off. Though the body he wore looked young, his manner was composed and mature beyond it. You must have heard of Elio. Oh, you actually know that fellow who calls himself a slave of destiny? Elio and I are very similar. Are you saying you can also see destiny and predict the future? Precisely. Bai Luan fixed Heita with a steady look and said, Even though this is our first meeting, I know you are Heita, the 83rd member of the Genius Society, twice a guest of the Aeons, the one who saved her homeworld 19 times. You're also the developer of the simulated universe and the owner of Heita Space Station. Heita smiled slightly at his confident recital. You do know a lot, but a few points are wrong. I only saved my world 15 or 16 times, I think, and simulated universe, space station, I've never heard of them. Bai Luan kept a calm, contemplative expression, but inside he panicked. He hadn't considered the timeline. He'd arrived before Heita had even built her space station. That station had existed for at least 7 centuries in his knowledge. Why had he come so early? He'd have to fix this. Quickly, he said, it seems I've revealed more than I should. I should be more careful, lest others who can glimpse destiny take offense. So you mean the 19th rescue of the Azure Star, the space station, and the simulated universe are things that will happen in the future? Heita asked. Exactly. If I don't do those things, can destiny be changed? Destiny is called destiny because when you deliberately oppose it, your every step tends to lead right into its winding course. Heita snorted. Space charlatans. This genius doesn't buy that sort of talk. That's your choice, Bai Luan said, spreading his hands. I can't change it. Heita looked at him for a long moment, unable to tell whether he was lying. Then she decided to use technology. She clapped twice and several Heita puppets materialized. Some brought heavy leather armchairs and mahogany coffee tables. Others carried steaming bone china teapots and delicate pastries. A few of them cooperated to assemble a Plex device covered in sensors, cables, and blinking lights, a contraption that looked disturbingly like an electric chair. Bai Luan's eyes darted to it and back to Herta. She had settled into a leather armchair and was sipping tea, the puppets lined up dutifully behind her. Noticing his stare, she set her teacup down and selected a pastry, then said, "What are you worried about? That's just a lie detector. Sit in it and it'll tell us truth from lies in an instant." Could he trick a machine, especially one invented by a universe-grade genius? Bai Luan felt doomed. Then the system's voice whispered in his head, "Sit on it. I'll protect you." The panic eased. He sat. A puppet fitted a helmet over his head. "Is everything you said true?" Herta asked. "All true," he told her. Herta glanced at the helmet and saw no alarm. Could this little fellow really foresee the future? It seemed unlikely, but she trusted her invention. "How did you get here?" she asked. Background, origin. How could he say, "The system sent me"? He needed a credible story. Suddenly, aha. I was an anonymous person, and for some reason, aha took an interest in me and sent me here. Even my body changed into this, he said, pointing to himself. "You mean the Aeon of Trailblaze did this?" Herta prompted. Yes. Bai Luan nodded with exaggerated certainty, making aha the perfect scapegoat for anything outrageous. Herta looked at the helmet again. Still nothing. "Trailblaze did this, huh? I can understand your confusion. I didn't believe he would do such a thing before he sent me here. But I underestimated the Aeon of Trailblaze. He's aha. What can't he do?" Bai Luan said, sounding genuinely exasperated. Herta chuckled. The idea of a random Aeon prank, picking someone from the audience as a target, was at once amusing and mildly infuriating. "Why were you anonymous in the first place?" "Because I didn't want to be caught by the company. Thanks to Elio, people like me are highly sought after. Who knows what would have happened if they'd captured me?" "But if you can foresee destiny, couldn't that help you avoid capture?" Herta asked. Bai Luan shrugged. "It didn't help me against aha. So the ability isn't as powerful as people say. No one, even Aeons, are omniscient or omnipotent. Least of all, a mortal like me. At least you're self-aware enough to know this ability brings trouble and to hide. That's better than fools who, given a little power, go chasing danger. But why tell me any of this? You were going to dissect me for research. If I didn't speak, was I just supposed to wait to be sliced up?" Herta laughed, a short, light sound. "You actually believe that? I was just trying to scare you. After aha messed with me, I learned hiding doesn't work. Any random accident can make me lose everything. It's safer to become strong." "You're right." Herta considered him a moment. "Why do you want to stay with me? Those reasons don't quite convince me." "Destiny tells me I'll be useful to you. It hasn't said when, but I will be. So, Miss Herta, do you believe in destiny? Or at least, are you interested in spending time to test whether it exists?" The lie detector showed no alarm. Since everything Bai Luan said had registered as true, Herta trusted the device and, by extension, his words. "Then, I'll keep you for long-term observation." She stretched, stood, and addressed the puppets behind her. "Take him away. Prepare clothes, find him quarters, and assign him some random tasks." Bai Luan let out a silent, grateful breath. Everything since he sat in that seat had been improvised. Convincing a Genius Society member with a hastily constructed lie was a real challenge. He'd only meant to try his luck. He hadn't expected to succeed. Thank whatever gods there were. No, scratch that. Thank Herta and the system. Both of you are my true gods, he thought. A puppet removed the helmet. As he looked up, Herta reached out and pinched his cheek. "People who can see destiny don't look particularly special, do they?" She examined his face more closely, fingers pressing his cheek slightly. Then she smiled. "You're quite pleasant to look at. Very pretty eyes." She straightened. "I don't keep idlers here. Prove your usefulness quickly." "Understood, Miss Herta. I'll be useful as soon as I can. Then I'll look forward to it." Herta waved and turned away. The efficient puppets immediately began to clear the scene. The lie detector was disassembled, the tea set and furniture vanished, and the corridor returned to its usual cold emptiness. One of the Herta puppets stepped up to him. "Bai Luan, right? Follow me." 3. A wonderful new life? Bai Luan trailed behind the Herta puppet. Since his body had been shrunk, he was now about the same height as a small Herta. It looked like it would take some time for him to return to his original size. He knew nothing about this genius's maze-like home, so all he could do was follow the puppet step by step. He wondered, briefly and desperately, if there might be any men's clothes in Herta's home. Then the awful truth hit him. Why on earth would Miss Herta's home have men's clothes? Apart from Herta and her puppets, almost no one lived here permanently. If he asked the puppet, it would say, "Why would Miss Herta's home need such superfluous things?" Right. So there probably weren't any men's clothes. Then what would he wear? Surely they wouldn't force him into women's clothes. No. Bai Luan's mind raced. There was a real possibility they'd make him wear a Herta puppet outfit. Their heights were similar, and their builds seemed alarmingly similar. The more he compared himself to the puppet leading the way, the more plausible it became. He felt a small surge of despair. Why are they so similar? Is MiHoYo's universal character modeling at work? Why is Miss Herta flat-chested? Bai Luan had never wanted a specific body part to be larger more than at that moment. Where's the development team? Where's the Great Thunderclap Temple? Help me. I don't want to wear women's clothes. Just as he was about to sink into despair, the Herta puppets produced a pile of weaving tools and began working on the spot. In an instant, several Hertas took different roles, selecting fabric, cutting, sewing. An assembly line sprang up and started running right in front of him. Bai Luan solemnly vowed that he had never slandered Miss Herta. Any earlier insults had been the work of an alternate personality, which he had summarily executed. Miss Herta was perfect. Even if she was flat-chested, she was perfect. Looking at the fast-moving assembly line, Bai Luan could only gape. The puppet's versatility was ridiculous. While they hurried to make his clothes, another Herta puppet appeared with a tablet that glowed cerulean. As per Miss Herta's request, we need to test your IQ. Please complete the questions on this. Bai Luan took the tablet. IQ test question bank 13.3. The version number made him grimace. He began answering in order, from the simplest 1 + 1, 2, to harder equations, to functions. Then the questions turned into nonsense. What kind of questions were these? How do you calculate the optimal angle for a rocket launch? The airtight principles of non-full coverage spacesuits? How to reverse aging? All of these were here. Even with 10 more heads, he couldn't answer them. Even that stereotypical old genius with his tongue sticking out would be stumped. And the damned question bank still showed a 92% progress bar. Is this what geniuses do? For a while, Bai Luan felt like an innocent mountain kid being thrown into an ocean of knowledge. Oh no, will they kick me out tomorrow? With a sinking feeling, he kept skipping questions he didn't understand, hunting for anything he could solve. He finally found a calculation he could barely comprehend and started working it out when time ran out. The answer submission closed. Well, that was that. The puppet snatched the tablet from his hands and read the result under Bai Luan's anxious gaze. A smart person in the eyes of the public? Barely passable. So acceptable. Bai Luan exhaled. He swore that if anyone ever claimed studying hard was useless again, he would explode at them. Before he could bask in relief, the Herta puppets returned with the finished clothes and presented them to him. A distant wall slid open, revealing a small changing room. Go in and test the fit, the puppet instructed. Can they actually make these that fast? Bai Luan muttered, taking the outfit and stepping inside. The clothes he'd been wearing, system-issue basics, were simple to remove. Putting on Herta's garments was trickier. The set favored Herta's colors, purple and black. It was an elegant tailcoat ensemble, dress pants, a shirt, vest, jacket, and a purple bow tie. Bai Luan fiddled with the bow tie and felt a little grateful he'd once worked as a high-end waiter. He at least knew how to wear formal clothes properly. A sloppy fit would have been a disaster. When he finally smoothed everything into place and looked in the mirror, he saw his new face for the first time. Gilded eyes, short black hair, youthfully flawless features, an impeccably crafted face. The system had optimized and refined his previous life face, giving him a look that was sharp, distant, and a little intimidating. The vest emphasized his slim, well-proportioned body. The whole package radiated a cool, unapproachable aura. Bai Luan admired it briefly. The idea of having to play warm and expressive with that handsome, somewhat frosty face made him laugh inside. Heh. System, guess what I'll do with this handsome face in the future? I want to. Accompany the Stellaron to rummage through trash cans, the system offered. Damn it, system. Your IQ must be 14514, Bai Luan cursed. He swore he'd try it at least once. Not the time to dawdle. He stepped out, and the Heita puppet glanced him over. It's quite presentable. I'm curious, are you being remotely controlled by Miss Heita right now, or are you in intelligent robot mode? This, Bai Luan asked. Of course intelligent mode. Miss Heita is occupied with countless tasks. You are not valuable enough for her to watch constantly. Another puppet handed him a brand new phone. He blinked. It felt surreal. For me? Of course, you'll be working here. You need a phone. Consider it an investment from Miss Heita. And I'll accept it. The phone even had a case, with the tailcoat, the phone, the handsome face, and most importantly, a whole new identity in the Honkai. Star Rail World, his beginner's package was complete. Any life here would be infinitely more interesting than waiting to die from terminal liver cancer. A notification pinged on his new phone. Heita invites you to join Heita's home. You have joined Heita's home. Heita sent you a file, Miss Heita's home map. You have received the file. As a newcomer, let's start by memorizing the map of Miss Heita's home, a puppet advised. It was just a home, and it had a map. Bai Luan opened the file. An overhead structural diagram appeared. Oh, it doesn't look particularly exaggerated. He pinched the screen to zoom in. More details flickered into view, dense markers and passages spreading like a spiderweb. He zoomed out, then in again. He zoomed a third time, and the full scale revealed itself. It wasn't a joke. This place was enormous. Bai Luan stared at the map and felt the weight of it press on him. Do I have to memorize all of it? He asked the puppet with a troubled expression. Of course. A new life had begun. Not terrible, but he thought maybe not exactly easy either. For he didn't choose the wrong person. Bai Luan was assigned a room. It wasn't big, wasn't small, perfectly square, like a precisely cut metal cube. The space had clearly been used for storage, and now, inconveniently, it was his. The clutter in the room was left to him. He asked the Heita puppet what to do with it. The reply was succinct, they're yours. So he ended up with a room and a pile of blind boxes. Opening blind boxes was fun at first, but it lost its charm quickly when he discovered he had no idea what most of the items were. He held a metallic plate, and without a manual or name, he didn't know its purpose, so he put it back unopened. He opened several more, all unfamiliar, except for a pocket watch. The excitement of free stuff faded into frustration. To Heita, those items were scrap. To Bai Luan, in that moment, they were junk, not even useful scraps. Maybe in the future, when he grew and learned, these things would have purpose. Not now. He tidied a little, moved some appropriately sized boxes, and spread out a soft, unknown fabric he'd found. In a corner, he fashioned a makeshift bed, boxes and the soft cloth. He stood with his hands on his hips, pleased. Humph, my extraordinary adaptability, he thought. Give me a moldy employee dorm or a shabby rental and I'll make it mine. His phone chimed. A message from Heita. Your daily necessities and basic furniture will be delivered by a robot shortly. Remember to sign for them. Bai Luan froze and stared at the ragged bed he'd just assembled. All that work for nothing. He tapped back. That's so nice. I thought employees had to take care of that themselves. You know what to say at a time like this. Long live Miss Heita. Still clever. Settle in for today and try to memorize the map I sent. I'll arrange your work tomorrow. That's all. He locked his phone and looked at the ragged pile of boxes again. What trash, he muttered, and dismantled the bed. 2 rounds of tidying had worn him out, especially knowing it had been pointless. But he felt oddly content, not from masochism, but from the simple joy of ordinary trouble. After years shadowed by illness and impending death, being able to move freely, feel tired, and worry over junk felt like luxury. To run, jump, fuss, not being in pain was wonderful. He sat on a wooden crate and fiddled with his phone. Phones here weren't so different from the ones he remembered, only the apps connected to an entire universe instead of a single planet. The familiarity was almost uncanny. He opened a shopping app. A flashy ad popped up. Are you tired of hostile forces constantly jumping in front of you? Tired of red tape before every civilizational exchange? Introducing Peacemaker, Type 2, Custom Enemy Annihilation Cannon. When the main cannon's charge light turns on, 99.7% of civilizations will immediately appreciate the value of peaceful dialogue. Save 90% on diplomatic headaches with one purchase. What are you waiting for? Click here and grab yours now. P.S. Annihilation may attract the attention of the Aeon of Preservation. Please be sure to purchase our Gaze of Qliphoth insurance package. The ad stunned him. The price string of zeros felt like it could buy lives. Recommending this to me is a bit too optimistic, he thought, and shut his phone off. Silence settled back in, the piles of junk like cold-eyed spectators. He started planning. With his current body, true self-sufficiency seemed unlikely. If Heita hadn't let him stay and had tossed him out, penniless and without communication or support, his survival odds were slim. His quick thinking had already solved identity, food, and shelter, for now. The system spoke then, and you also managed to attract the attention of an Aeon. Bai Luan froze. Me? He thought. That's right. When you pinned the blame on Aha, he started watching you. For some reason, he didn't expose you. Maybe he thinks the fun I'll bring later is greater than the fun of exposing me now, Bai Luan mused. A reasonable guess. He hasn't shown any intention to harm you. He's more like an excited spectator. You're good at finding adjectives, the system teased. Never mind. If he's watching, he's watching. He's not giving you power anyway. Maybe if he watches long enough, he'll develop feelings and save you if you're about to die. You don't mind company while you're under observation, do you? I know him, Bai Luan answered. He doesn't know me. Same difference, he shrugged. Aha had no sense of shame. The conversation ended, and Bai Luan went back to planning. First, he would spend his beginner phase with Heita, learn self-preservation skills, then leave and go wherever he wanted, preferably get on the express. The life of a nameless was most appealing. But could his body last that long? He'd need a way to extend his lifespan. Heita had methods to reverse aging, but she wouldn't use them on him without reason. He'd have to prove his value. Present matters were more important. During his growth, the Prophet of Destiny persona mustn't collapse in Heita's eyes. He had to show value quickly, otherwise being kicked out would be a disaster. He had two usable system functions, the Little Black Room and the Artifact Forger. Forging artifacts, how exactly did one do that? He grabbed a scrap of paper and folded it into a paper airplane. It looked like any ordinary paper plane. Had his ability activated? Was it an artifact? Artifact, casually made paper airplane. Effect, in a paper airplane contest with friends, use this plane and it will fly slightly farther than your opponents, securing a decisive victory. This should have been given to me in elementary school, he muttered. The ability to casually create artifacts clearly required practical skill and knowledge. Otherwise, you ended up with a room full of materials and only a toy plane. He tried the other function. The Little Black Room promised infinite practice time. Do you want to enter the Little Black Room? Enter. He found himself in a copied version of his room. Aren't I still in the room? He asked. When you enter the Little Black Room, the surrounding environment copies in with you. Living things don't enter. If you don't believe me, open the door and see. He twisted the door open. Beyond it was a pitch-black void. Wow, it really is dark. Otherwise, it wouldn't be called the Little Black Room. Inside, time in the outside world is static. You can enter and exit freely. The only thing that interferes is your willpower. A very powerful ability, Bai Luan said. He closed the door, glanced at the map file Heita had sent, and grinned. If the Little Black Room could neutralize the time cost of learning, just give me a huge map, he thought. Watch me engrave it into my mind. If he could spend hours, days, weeks inside without outside time passing, he could memorize everything and appear to be a genius before Heita and the Genius Society. He would seem to understand anything at a glance. Tell Aha he hadn't misjudged me. I'm a mortal about to deceive geniuses, he realized with a mix of pride and irony. Not a real genius, but with this trick, I could fake genius forever without being found out. Does that count as genius? 5. How did you get in too? After a short day of getting settled, Bai Luan could almost call this world a home. Strictly speaking, he couldn't even measure it in days. He had no idea how long he'd sat in that Little Black Room, staring at the map files until they were burned into his mind. Now he knew Heita's residence intimately. The layout was a map in his head. His phone alarm rang. Lying on the bed, Bai Luan opened his eyes, turned it off, and sat up, his expression briefly vacant. It wasn't sleepiness. Spending too long in the little black room made the real world feel like a different plane. He could still see a circuit diagram of Herta's house with his inner eye. The system had been right. The only limit to staying in the little black room was his will. No hunger, no fatigue, no sleep, only loneliness. Too long there would probably fracture a person's mind. It almost drove me crazy, he muttered, shaking his head as if to clear the lingering strangeness, then stretched and swung his legs out of bed. Yesterday, after Herta messaged him, furniture had arrived. He stood in front of the wardrobe, yawned, and pulled out one of 5 identical tailcoats, more than enough for rotation. The simple clothes the system had built for him made decent pajamas. After changing, he stepped out and started following the mental map toward a place to wash up. His room had originally been a storage closet, so naturally it had no bathroom. He'd have to ask a Herta puppet about installing one. Not having a washroom was genuinely inconvenient. Fortunately, there was a communal washing area nearby and toiletries had been delivered the day before. A single round trip, and he was cleaned up. He was just wondering whether to proactively ask a puppet about plumbing when his phone buzzed. Herta, are you awake? Location: go here to wash. A robot will come later to convert your room into a private bathroom. Staying with Herta turned out to have extraordinary perks. The file the puppet had sent was ridiculously detailed. Layout, circuits, pipeline routes. Memorizing it all would be brutal, so the idea of robots handling the retrofit was a relief. He tapped back. I've already washed. What should I do next? Herta, you learned the map that fast? Sharp mind. Come here. Miss Herta will teach you. Bai Luan found the location in the map stored in his head and plotted routes. 3 or 4 optimal paths formed instantly. He picked the quickest. On my way, he answered. 5 minutes later, he stood before a Herta puppet. 5 minutes on foot is the optimal route time. Efficient, the puppet said. It's not hard. I just memorized the whole map, Bai Luan replied. All of it in one night? The puppet asked, curious. Bai Luan nodded. The puppet watched him for a moment, then surprised him. Now I want to go to the plant cultivation zone. What's the fastest way? Bai Luan pointed at a nearby carpet. The fastest would be that flying carpet. I can't use it, so if I had to go on foot, I'd go straight along this path, through the gravity reversal zone, then take a left at... He rattled off the route he'd already rehearsed. The puppet compared his plan to the optimal route stored in her system. A faint smile crossed her features. The route was correct, only minor differences from hers. He really had crammed the map into his head and could use it smoothly. To an ordinary observer, his memory might look genius. To a Herta puppet, it was merely interesting. Not stupid at all, she said. Your lessons will be easier. Miss Herta said to find things for me to do. What exactly will she have me do? I'll teach you whatever I see useful, the puppet replied, glancing at the carpet Bai Luan had pointed to. Follow me. She led him to the carpet. Since you've memorized the map, you should know this isn't a normal carpet, but a portable vehicle disguised as one. Bai Luan crouched and touched it. It was incredibly soft, no hint that it could carry people, much less fly. Style-wise and tactilely, it was indistinguishable from a carpet. Wouldn't it be cheaper if it didn't pretend to be a carpet, he murmured. That wouldn't match the decor, the puppet said. So, style over function then. Bai Luan could already see the economic benefits if the technology were used for freight, but here it was an ostentatious nod to taste. The puppet continued, oblivious to his thoughts. Its use is simple. Only someone identified as Herta can activate it. An activation condition that ignored everyone else. Perfect. If you absolutely must, you can ask a nearby Herta puppet to take you, but refusal is likely. How do I make refusal less likely? Depends on whether the puppet's aggressive module is activated. Usually it's on. Figures, Bai Luan said flatly. A module like that is as sensible as a self-destruct button in a secret base. Stop watching cliché movies. Staged crises are boring. Miss Herta has more ingenious ideas. So I always have to walk? Not always. If you perform exceptionally, Miss Herta might let you use it. Another unlikely future favor. Bai Luan crouched, pretending to inspect the carpet. Better to study it himself than hope for a grant. Little black room, activated. Let me see your structure, he thought to himself. and slipped back into the familiar black silence to analyze. "Where is this?" he heard a voice say. He opened his eyes. The Herta puppet was standing in front of him, not the original one outside, but a replica the little black room had generated. She mirrored Herta's mannerisms and speech with uncanny accuracy. For a moment, Bai Luan forgot the truth about puppets. They were machines, precise imitations built from Herta's childhood personality template, non-living, crafted entities. The puppet walked closer to the edge of the replicated environment. Beyond the door lay the same pure, absolute black that the little black room was made of, the void that consumed everything outside the copy. The dark reflected in her purple eyes. There was no fear, no panic, only an almost greedy, feverish thirst for knowledge burning in them. "Interesting," she whispered, like a scientist who'd discovered a new continent. Bai Luan watched her study the void. The replicated puppet was curious in a way the original outside had not been, an emergent sheen of wonder the room had given her. He realized again that although these puppets behaved like living beings, they were not living. The little black room couldn't import living things. It could only simulate them. So he thought, looking at her, "What should I do with you now, puppet?" 6. "Here, you are the only one." Bai Luan watched the Herta puppet examine the little black room. A long dormant spark of curiosity lit its violet eyes, making them catch the light like jewels. It was the first time he'd seen Miss Herta look like this since he arrived. Presumably, a genius like her hadn't encountered anything she couldn't instantly understand in a very long time. Bai Luan hesitated, torn between telling the puppet the truth and keeping it in ignorance. Then he decided on honesty. After all, this was his little black room. Everything inside it was a replica of reality. The lifelike Herta before him was no exception. Even if she knew she wasn't real, it wouldn't affect the outside world. No great upheaval here would change anything there. And besides, the little black room could not cause a real commotion. Still, how would the Herta puppet react to being told it was a copy? As Bai Luan explained, the puppet slowly understood. "You mean I'm just a replica and don't exist in reality?" it asked. "That's right. How does it feel to know this? Once I leave the little black room, you may disappear with me." Bai Luan had expected alarm, grief, maybe a desperate clinging to existence. After all, it was a puppet, and now a replica of a puppet, born in this tiny, one-third sized room and destined to die within it. No one but him would know it had existed. Such a brief, suffocating life felt unbearably bleak. The response, however, was unexpected. The replicated Herta put a hand on her hip and smiled. "So what?" Bai Luan blinked. "You don't care at all? If this happened to me, I might break down. I'm just a puppet. The real Miss Herta has thousands upon thousands of me in her residence. What does it matter if one disappears unremembered? So you've accepted it calmly?" "Of course. Even as a puppet, I'm Herta. How could a genius be upset by something so dull? I'd rather spend the time thinking about more interesting things." Bai Luan regarded the composed puppet with a genuine admixture of admiration and pity. "Truly a genius. Your thought process is beyond the comprehension of ordinary mortals." She cocked her head. "But your ability is special. You can activate this room at will, replicate anything, and the time difference between the two worlds can be almost static." "How do you manage that? If I were to replicate all of that, I'd have to." True to form, the puppet, Herta, was not troubled by the weight of his questions. To her, his revelation was feather light. To Bai Luan, it carried an unbearable gravity. He found himself speaking softly. "Miss Herta." She snapped back to him, a flicker of curiosity in those violet eyes. What is it?" He met her gaze, tone serious enough to be almost solemn. "In reality, you may be one among thousands, but here, in this small, timeless little black room," he paused, choosing his words precisely, "you are the only Herta." It was as much him comforting himself as trying to console her. The puppet regarded him for a long time. He couldn't tell what passed beneath that composed exterior. After a while, a faint, genuine smile curved her lips. "You are very interesting. I wish the real me had discovered this sooner." Not a bad response. "I thought you'd be disdainful of this kind of sentimental concern." "There's a bit of that," she admitted, then tilted her head in a sly, almost girlish way. "But it's been a while since anyone cared about me like this. Once in a while, it doesn't feel so bad. Do you want to stay?" Bai Luan asked. Just then, the system's voice cut in. May I preserve her? You may, Bai Luan replied after a moment's thought. It seemed only right to let the puppet choose. If you give me the right to decide when my existence ends, then I accept, Heita said. When I get bored, I can make myself disappear. You really don't care much whether you live or not, Bai Luan couldn't help but say. If I agree to live here, it's because I'm interested in the place and want to try deconstructing this space, she answered. Challenging the system? Fine, I don't care much either way. Bai Luan smiled and extended his hand. Then it seems we'll be spending some time together. I hope we can get along. Heita took his hand. As long as you don't bore me. That's quite a challenge. With that settled, Bai Luan turned his attention back to the carpet. He had summoned the little black room specifically to study it. Beneath the soft pile, he suspected, lurked countless intricate structures. He picked it up, wondering how to begin. Smash it open? Carefully unweave it? The idea of dismantling it by brute force felt wrong. You memorized the entire map in one night using this room? He asked. Yes. Though only one night passed for you, I don't know how long I was here to learn it all. Are you going to study the carpet now? Bai Luan nodded, and then realized, with a flush of embarrassment, that Heita was right there. Why was he puzzling things out alone when he could simply ask her to teach him? Heita folded her arms and watched him, as if seeing through the thought. You want me to teach you? Yes. Self-study is too slow. Agreed. How much do you know about this carpet? Bai Luan straightened, meeting her with eyes that reflected a glint of earnestness. Nothing. My understanding is a complete blank nothing. There was a 2-second pause before she shot back, unceremoniously. With that level of knowledge, you still dare to call yourself a prophet who can glimpse the threads of fate? No one said a prophet had to be knowledgeable. Miss Heita, are you interested in how long it takes to cultivate a genius from scratch? She looked intrigued. Oh? It's an experiment. See how long it would take to teach someone to become a genius even the real Miss Heita would acknowledge. Are you in the mood? All right, she said, almost too quickly. Bai Luan's spirits lifted until she added slowly, a mischievous smile playing about her mouth. When I'm in the mood, I'll teach you. His smile deflated. Who knew when this ancestor would be in the mood? Still, something was better than nothing. As he fretted over the best way to take the carpet apart, tear, smash, drop, gnaw, pull, Heita's voice cut through his thoughts. It has a dismantling mechanism. He looked up to find her sitting opposite him, clearly amused and in a good mood. Where is it? It's right. Her words hung in the not-so-large room. Their conversation filled the tiny space with sound. For the first time since he'd been here, the surrounding void felt touched by a faint, living warmth. 7. A genius is a genius. When Bai Luan finally emerged from the little black room, he no longer saw the carpet in front of him as a mere piece of decoration. He understood its internal structure, assembly sequence, and operating principles down to the smallest detail. Given the right tools, he could disassemble it and put it back together without breaking a sweat. He had studied himself into a near stupor to get there. This carpet was one of Heita's casual whims, an absurd little simulated universe she'd designed on a lark. Bai Luan stood, feeling both exhilarated and oddly small. He now knew how to hack the carpet and grant himself permissions, but there was no need. He could use the same principles to build his own transport. All he needed were some tools, and more importantly, permission. Directly using Heita's crafting station felt presumptuous. Better to wait for the Heita puppet's consent. He looked at the Heita puppet standing nearby and felt a strange pull. She was identical to the Heita who'd taught him in the little black room, so much so that the sight of her was almost disorienting. Inside the little black room, when the real Heita realized she would have to teach him and that his genius front was an act, she had once considered self-destructing. But she couldn't resist the chance to study a system that presented such a challenge. She hadn't had something so interesting to tinker with in a long time. Eventually, Heita summed up his learning pattern for herself as if it were a case study. Encounter an unfamiliar field, ask Heita, understand a little, stop asking and explore on his own, confidently invent a plausibly logical but actually impossible self-explanation, experiment, fail spectacularly, realize he's out of his depth. Ask Heita again. Teaching could be a bit tedious, but the rest was delightful, watching him fumble through his errors with absolute sincerity, then seeing the instant bewilderment flash in his golden eyes when experiments went wrong, like a lost fawn, was entertaining in ways only a bored genius could appreciate. In the little black room, one taught at leisure and watched with delight. The other learned awkwardly, but steadily. It was a strange, symbiotic harmony. For Bai Luan, it was close to finding the best teacher in the universe. Outside the little black room, though, he and the Heita puppet had only known each other for 2 days. He didn't want to come on too strong, but he also wanted to become familiar with her quickly. The puppet's dry, clipped voice broke into his thoughts. "How is it?" she asked. "Both the softness and the hair-level detail reproduction are impeccable. When it's not activated, 99.9% of people would think it's just a beautiful carpet." Bai Luan remembered how agonizing the learning had been. Heita had used the disguise technology to keep the transport consistent with the house's style, but the tech itself was anything but casual. If you could make mechanical creations look like furniture, imagine applying that to combat suits, vehicles, or weapons. Enemy tactical reports would be nonsense. The opposing side used a broom to fire colorful lasers and broke through our lines. A man in pink pajamas charged the battlefield. Our tanks bounced off his clothes. The enemy rode a bicycle our fighter jets couldn't catch. Genius work had a horrifying, brilliant reach. "You look like you had an epiphany," the puppet observed. "I'm just stunned by your charm, Miss Heita. Geniuses are geniuses," Bai Luan said, trying to sound admiring. The Heita puppet nodded as if on cue. "That's right. Geniuses are geniuses." She fished her phone out of nowhere, swiped, and sent a document to his. "This is the carpet's care and safety manual. Since you have a good memory, I won't repeat everything. Read it and ask if you don't understand." He opened the file and skimmed. Words flashed by as he compared them with the memories in his head, stopping only when his recollection wavered. "No problem. I hope you don't mind if I ask a lot of questions." "Ask all you want. I might not answer. Flood my inbox, and I'll flag you and activate the auto-response module." Bai Luan could already see ways to improve the manual, to turn it into a foolproof instruction guide, but when his scan finished, he closed the file. The puppet watched him multitask and asked, "How long until you master this?" He couldn't say he already had. He wanted to appear competent without sounding arrogant, so he hedged. "Perhaps this afternoon? You learn fast. I can teach you more things in a day. Whatever you like. Then let me see your limits for the day." She stepped onto the carpet, tapped it once, and the patterns shimmered a faint purple. "Come on, I'll take you to the next place." Bai Luan stepped onto the carpet. A soft suction held him in place, an anti-ejection measure in case the carpet accelerated suddenly. The thin-looking weave of fabric could, in reality, transport 4 or 5 people with ease. Once you knew the principles, it felt less like magic and more like applied science. The Heita puppet didn't ease into it. The carpet launched with a 0-frame start, throwing them into motion. The scenery streaked by as wind whipped his face. Worse, her driving was wildly aggressive. Sharp right-angle drifts, wall-hugging turns, an unannounced 360-degree aerial spin. In the little black room, both Bai Luan and the flying carpet vanished and reappeared simultaneously. But when they landed, his face had drained of color. He had never ridden a roller coaster in his previous life. He certainly had not expected this. The Heita inside the little black room watched him reemerge. From my perspective, you left and came back. You look like you've been through something. Time flow rates do differ." She glanced around. The moment Bai Luan appeared, the surroundings had shifted, instant teleportation to another area. Intriguing. On the ground, Bai Luan didn't respond immediately. He dropped to the floor to recover, then glared up at the puppet in a half-complaining, half-amused voice. "You never told me you liked to speed. Did the real me take you on a flying carpet?" the puppet asked, inspecting his pale, shaken face. "You don't seem to be used to it. You know that, and you still say it," he snapped. "This genius always pursues efficiency. I should have guessed." After the brief exchange, his color returned. He tried to compose himself and not look terrified until they reached their destination. The Heita in the little black room had suggested he could meet her in that state, part teasing, part curiosity. Wouldn't the real you laugh at me no matter what? Bai Luan murmured, half smiling. It's precisely because I find you cute that I'd laugh, she replied. Although the real me probably wouldn't admit it. You'd say, I'm laughing at you because it's funny. What's wrong with that, right? Aren't you familiar with me enough to know? Of course he was. They had spent who knew how long together in that small, strange classroom. Thanks, Heita. It's really easier to talk with you there. I wish we could communicate like that outside, too. His figure winked out of the little black room, and the sensations of reality reasserted themselves. He didn't go back. Instead, he crouched and idly plucked at the carpet's fluff until he felt steadier. Miss Heita, he said, voice small, if possible, could we go a little slower? The puppet looked surprised to see such a helpless, vulnerable expression on a young man who had otherwise performed admirably since arriving. You're afraid of this? She asked, a hint of incredulous amusement in her tone. Bai Luan nodded, weak but resolute. The puppet gave a short, playful chuckle. Heh, you're actually afraid of this? She seemed delighted at discovering a new, unexpected quirk in someone who'd been consistently impressive. Who would have thought such a capable person would stumble at the speed of a flying carpet? All right, she said, this time I'll go slower, but if you plan to stay in this world, you'd better adapt quickly. The carpet eased up, and Bai Luan finally let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He still had to build a vehicle of his own, one he could control and get used to. Technology could be mastered. He just needed time, tools, and a bit more courage. 8. I think it must be called Inspiration Mushroom. The flying carpet was astonishingly fast. What would normally have taken 10 minutes was over in a few dozen seconds, and it landed smoothly. When Bai Luan stepped off, his feet met a solid, unfamiliar floor, and he felt steadied for the first time since the ride. He hadn't been able to memorize the route during such a jolting trip, so he had no idea where he was. Looking around, he felt like he was in a forest full of strange, impossible plants. Some of them even seemed more animal than vegetable. Miss Heita cultivates flowers and plants too? He asked. The Heita puppet glanced at him. Not just ordinary plants. Some only look normal. At worst, they move a lot. Others have mouths. Some even have teeth. They'd make excellent defenses in Dave's garden against zombies. This is a botanical garden Miss Heita whipped up on a whim, the puppet explained. She genetically programmed plant life from the azure star. There are probably a few hundred varieties here. Moving ones, still ones, pretty ones, ugly ones, poisonous ones, harmless ones. So my next task is to memorize all these plants? Exactly. Though they look different and behave differently, they have one common trait. They all photosynthesize? Bai Luan offered. The puppet gave him a look that said, could you ask something we don't already know? Then it answered, not all of them. Some don't photosynthesize at all. Their true commonality is much simpler. They are all, without exception, extremely hard to keep alive. Sounds like I'm in for a difficult job. He swallowed. The journey had been stimulating in more ways than one. The puppet pointed to a brown mushroom. Do you see that one? It talks? That's why it's here. The useless things were already culled by Miss Heita. The ones that remain are worth keeping. What if I kill one? I'll report it directly to Miss Heita. What she does with the culprit is for you to imagine. He had a bad feeling about that. That brown mushroom, if the humidity's too high, it dies. If it's over-fertilized, it dies. And if it's in a bad mood, it dies too. This mushroom's as pampered as a noble. Say the wrong thing, and it might have a fit and die. Does this kind of thing really have to be given to me? You can refuse. I can give you easier jobs. The puppet's tone turned matter-of-fact. But if you do this well, it proves your value, and you can stay here as a gardener. The easy jobs can be handled by robots. Your worth would be lower. Why didn't you say that sooner? Fine. I'll take it. If I finish the work, can I use the facilities? Do you even know how to use them? The puppet asked. And you think you should use them? I can learn, and I learn fast. The puppet paused, then said, your right to stay is based on your value. If the trouble you cause exceeds your value, you'll be kicked out. Can you accept that? No problem. Good, then use them. Just don't accidentally blow up the laboratory, release something that shouldn't be released, or nearly destroy the Azure Star. That would be a serious headache. Bai Luan's mouth twitched. It sounded as if that had already happened. Had it? He imagined, grimly, how mismeaning. Heita must have saved the Azure Star from one crisis after another. No need to dwell on why those crises had happened. Maybe only a few of them were related to her experiments. He pushed the thought away. Since you've decided, start teaching me. All right. The puppet led him past towering rose bushes. First, these roses. Note their size. Bai Luan blinked. A rose bush taller than a person stood before him, its blooms like ornate crowns. It made him feel small. They change color with their moods. Blue means happy. Dark red means hostile. Right now, the bushes displayed every color: red, blue, pink, purple, white, yellow, orange. Among them, a single black rose caught his eye like a shadow. What does black mean? Depressed. Flowers get depressed? Why not? Managing their moods is part of your job. And if I make them unhappy, they'll shoot out thorns. But don't worry too much. The roses are inspired by the Knights of Beauty, so they're generally well-tempered. If you can provoke one into attacking you, I'll give you credit. You have some talent. He smirked. The idea of Knights of Beauty being short-tempered was absurd. Then the puppet pointed out a pumpkin with a carved permanent scowl. This is a jack-o'-lantern pumpkin. Miss Heita thought, most of them are going to be jack-o'-lanterns anyway, so why not make them grow like that and program them accordingly? What if it's not Halloween? Bai Luan asked. Then leave them. After modification, they're not really edible anyway. They're extremely hard. To demonstrate, the puppet lifted a hammer and brought it down on the pumpkin. The blow landed with a thud, but when the hammer was lifted, the pumpkin was undamaged, solid as rock. Bai Luan felt the impact could have killed him. If you raise it well, its grimace will soften into a smile. If you neglect it, it'll be a crying face. And if I need a crying pumpkin, you can beat a smiling one until it cries. The puppet answered casually. It can change expression? Yes, but slowly. They came to the brown mushroom. Good morning, Miss Heita Mushroom, the puppet said. This is the talking mushroom I mentioned. Whether it's telepathy or some kind of illusion spores, it speaks, and it has a verbal tick. It ends sentences with mushroom. This feels more like magic than technology, Bai Luan murmured. He stared at the mushroom and then, with mock seriousness, he decided on a name. I think it must be called Inspiration Shroom. Inspiration Shroom, shroom, the mushroom replied, the shroom tag tacked on like clockwork. Bai Luan grinned. This verbal tick could be toyed with. Come on, Inspiration Shroom, repeat after me. Inspiration Shroom, Lee Shroom Lee, Inspiration Shroom, Inspiration. Inspiration Shroom Lee, Inspiration Shroom, the mushroom faithfully echoed, its shroom stuck on the end of the line. Perfect. He had found a tiny, ridiculous victory. The puppet finished its tour. One more thing. Every time you enter or leave the garden, you must undergo disinfection and cleaning. None of these plants should be carried off. Many are native to the Azure Star and could become invasive elsewhere. Invasive alien species, Bai Luan said. The documents will be sent to you. For now, move freely and familiarize yourself with the garden. Come here when you're ready to work. As the puppet finished, Bai Luan stepped into the little black room, an empty simulation he entered whenever he leveled up. He'd come out at max level this time, and before him lay a barren plot that matched the botanical garden's layout exactly. The moving vines, the long-mouthed flowers, glowing fungi, towering emotional roses, and the indestructible jack-o'-lanterns, none of them were here. Only bare soil, empty planting troughs, and cold instrument stands remained, as if the place had been stripped clean. Botanical garden? He echoed. The Heita puppet from inside the little black room had appeared beside him without his noticing, arms folded and a faintly mischievous smile on her doll-like face, as if she had just played a trick. Her violet eyes reflected the empty room with a knowing glint. Plants, she said, drawing out the word with a hint of amusement, are also a kind of living thing, so. She turned her head and looked at Bai Luan's frozen expression. Quietly, almost pityingly, she delivered the truth. They couldn't be replicated in here. That stung. His whole foundation for pretending to be a genius, his rehearsed actions in the replicated garden, had just been nullified. Without the plants to mimic, was he about to be exposed? Look, how cute. If this had been his old self, he would have been panicking, unsure, nervous, and convinced he would slip up. But after everything he'd been through, after so much time in the little black room, he wasn't the same person anymore. The little black room wasn't entirely unusable. It had just become less convenient. He could no longer bring living things into it, so he couldn't recreate reality perfectly or finish leveling up in there alone. He had to combine what he could do inside with the real world. The risk had increased, but that didn't make the little black room useless. He could still reproduce the botanical garden's layout, and he could always consult the Heita puppet inside to avoid foolish mistakes. "Have you thought of a solution?" the puppet asked. "I need your help," Bai Luan admitted. "I won't answer if you ask boring questions." "I won't ask," he promised. He sighed and scratched his head. "Looks like I'll have to take notes from now on." He stretched his hand and clenched it in empty air. A thick leather notebook and a retro fountain pen appeared in his palm. The Heita puppet was used to this sort of thing. At first, she had tried to study the mechanics of it, but the notebook's appearance defied logic and physics. If she had the authority to probe the system here, she would have made a study of it, but the system refused to grant that level of access. So she had done what she could, pestered the system through Bai Luan. The system, after all, had described itself as an observer that occasionally spoke, and both puppet and host had only exchanged a few words. "I'll be coming in and out of the little black room a lot to put together a botanical garden manual," Bai Luan said, writing the title, Botanical Garden Research Manual, across the first blank page in big letters. He held the notebook out, shook it at the Heita puppet, and added, "This will be more interesting, won't it?" He tossed the notebook up. For a moment, his figure vanished into the little black room. In reality, the Heita puppet watched him go, then spoke without looking back. "Stay here and get familiar with the place. I've got other things to take care of. You know the way home. Oh, don't come back before 4. There's a construction team expanding your room." "Understood," the puppet answered, and Bai Luan was left alone in the botanical garden. He had 2 immediate tasks: learn the job quickly and deal with the plant's problems. For instance, how do you treat a depressed rose? He didn't even know why a rose would be depressed. Could he possibly guess the thoughts of a flower? Then he remembered the talking mushroom. He went over to the small brown fungus he'd already decided to call Inspiration Shroom and crouched down. "Hello there, Inspiration Shroom." "Hello, what's your name, Shroom?" the mushroom asked. "My name is Bai Luan. I'm the new gardener. I'll probably be taking care of you all." "Can you do a good job, Shroom? You won't kill the shrooms, will you, Shroom?" "Whether I can or not, I have to do a good job, believe me. You don't seem very reliable, but Shroom can't resist. Shroom accepts its fate." "You're being too honest for a mushroom," Bai Luan muttered, then asked, "As a plant, can you understand what other plants are saying?" "Yes, Shroom." "That's great." He pointed toward the dark rose not far off. "Do you know why it's depressed?" "They're far from me. Shroom can't hear what they're saying," the mushroom replied. "You don't even have ears," Bai Luan said, bewildered. "What about it, Shroom?" The mushroom wiggled. "Shroom doesn't even have a mouth, but isn't Shroom talking to you, Shroom?" He had to laugh. He was actually talking to a mushroom. This world was getting stranger by the minute. "Can I move you, soil and all, over there, right next to the rose?" "Shroom is afraid you'll accidentally shovel me to death, Shroom," it said. Bai Luan drew a circle in the dirt around the little fungus with his finger. "A circle this big won't hurt you, will it?" "Make it a bit bigger. Shroom is scared of dying." He hauled the circle out a little wider. "How about now?" "Bigger." He expanded it again and again. "All right, if your roots were that long, I'd just eat you." You don't want to eat Shroom. This size is fine, Shroom," it protested. He dug, grabbed a gardening shovel where the puppet had said the tools were kept, and with some effort lifted the mushroom and the clump of earth around it. He wasn't afraid of getting dirty. He simply carried it over to the roses and set it beside the dark bush. "Now, what's wrong?" he asked. The mushroom fell silent for a moment, then the rose leaned toward it and opened a little. "It says it has ugly spots on its face. They're spreading slowly. It feels ugly and uncomfortable, Shroom." "Spots? Where? Let me see." Bai Luan gently pushed the curled petals aside and inspected the lower left leaf. There were blackened blotches, difficult to see because the whole plant's color was dulled from depression. This looks like a disease. Let me check. He pulled out his phone and searched. Common flower ailment, black spot disease. Remove leaves, apply treatment. He wasn't sure these remedies would work on such unusual plants, so he planned to ask the Herta puppet later. For now, he touched the rose lightly. The black, it shifted subtly toward blue. He remembered that blue meant friendliness. That was a good sign. Inspiration, Shroom. Do you want to see the whole botanical garden? He asked. And no danger, Shroom. I'm protecting you. What are you afraid of? Because you don't look very strong, Shroom. Bai Luan's smile dropped. As a mushroom, you shouldn't be that honest. Is that so, Shroom? It said, but then became distracted. Shroom's front and back patterns are different. Shroom's front has a white dot. He peered at the cap. Where? Oh, there really is one. I learned something new. He carried the mushroom and ran around, checking beds, trees, and strange flora until he understood the state of most of the plants. Covered in dirt and satisfied, he returned the inspiration shroom to its spot and went into the little black room. From the puppet's vantage, Bai Luan tossed the notebook up, disappeared for a heartbeat, then reappeared and caught it. He filled the pages quickly, notes, sketches, and reminders. Finished collecting information? The Herta puppet asked. Yes, fast, right? Not bad. The puppet peered at the pages. One sheet was dominated by a mushroom sketch with an arrow to a small white dot and a bold note. This side is the front. Look for the white dot to avoid talking to the wrong side. Another page showed grinning pumpkins with a caption. Jokes help. Cold jokes may worsen crying faces. Use with caution. The black rose had its dark spots circled in red. Source of depression. Black spot disease. Prune plus medicate. All roses need checking. A tiny first aid kit was drawn nearby. I didn't expect you to be so thorough, the Herta puppet said, amused. Of course I have to be serious. This is the job you gave me, Bai Luan replied. He idly sketched a few exaggerated strokes in the notebook, and a chibi version of the Herta puppet popped up, all round and cute. He held it up. Look, how cute. Of course, a genius like me is cute no matter what, the Herta puppet replied, a note of self-satisfaction in her voice. 10. The price of being with a genius. Although he really wanted to go straight back to his little room and collapse onto the bed for a good rest, Bai Luan couldn't do that yet. First, it wasn't even 4 p.m. His little room hadn't fully expanded. Second, his clothes were dirty. He had roughly rinsed them when he left the botanical garden's disinfection area. The obvious mud was gone, but plenty of stains still clung to the fabric. Throwing himself onto the bed like that felt wrong. He needed to find somewhere to wash them. He took off his tailcoat, folded it, and draped it over his arm. Consulting the map in his head, he thought about the closest place to clean clothes. A route formed almost instantly, but it was a bit far. He glanced at the carpet subconsciously. Even if he could use it, he probably wouldn't. Better to just walk. Bai Luan shook the coat to fling off the remaining droplets. He didn't know what the material was, but it cleaned easily. Stains came away with a rinse of water, no detergent needed. High-tech products were wonderful. He refolded the coat and slung it over his arm. I remember there's a laboratory nearby, he muttered. He'd been thinking about building his own vehicle, so of course he wanted to check a lab out. One of the two major cheats the system had given him was the ability to turn manufactured items into curios. It would be a waste not to make some miraculous gadgets with that power. Besides, he'd already gotten permission from the Herta puppet to observe and copy the environment into his little black room for research. Decision made, Bai Luan walked toward the laboratory. Before long, he arrived at the lab's valve. It's closed, he said. A touchscreen authentication interface popped up. Had Herta entered his data into the entire station's database? Would a crimson warning flash the moment he touched it and summon guards and robots? He caught himself entertaining far too many paranoid scenarios. Imagination was no help. Just do it. Bai Luan slapped his palm onto the interface. The scanner hummed. Ne Luan. Position none. Authority level access granted. Level 4. Huh. That probably meant handyman or visitor. Maybe someday he'd get level 1. Mechanical whirring sounded and the valve opened, revealing the lab beyond. This wasn't an anime. There would be no dramatic scene cuts showcasing instruments with captions. So Bai Luan stepped into the lab with the clear-eyed curiosity of a university student and the gawking awe of Granny Lu entering the Grandview garden. One precise instrument after another came into view, and his mind went blank where names and purposes should have been. He felt the familiar sting of not knowing. In his previous life, he'd been used to that feeling and didn't care much. For him then, the pursuit of knowledge came second to making money. He wouldn't say that choice was wrong. Dying of cancer had just been rotten luck. But now reborn, he wanted to try a different path. Let me study everything thoroughly, he thought. Little black room. Activate! Light and shadow shifted, space folded, and Bai Luan stepped into the little black room. Heita snapped her thick notebook shut and looked up at him. From her perspective, he had vanished and reappeared in an instant. Time flowed differently inside. Heita glanced around. Every time he returned, the surroundings changed, like opening a blind box. Where had he gone this time? A laboratory? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, I was thinking of making something. Let me think with your current skill level. Heita rested a hand on her chin and considered for a moment. You'll probably run into a lot of difficulties. It can't be that bad, can it? Bai Luan tugged at the corner of his mouth helplessly. I should be stronger than I was at the start, right? I'm not denying your progress. You are definitely much stronger than you were at first. Her tone was flat, and the words that followed were just as cold. My point is, even if you've improved a lot, you're still not very good. Bai Luan shrugged, smiling wryly. You're still the same, sharp and hurtful, accurate and blunt. Heita never sugarcoated things. Honesty from her was inherently unpleasant. But this was the price of sharing a room with a genius. His ears endured Heita's barbs, and in return he made rapid progress under her guidance. Painful, but rewarding. I want to build a flying backpack, he said. It'll have 4 thrusters for forward propulsion. To do that, what do I need to learn? Can it be made in this lab? Can I use technology from the flying carpet? A flying backpack? Heita's brow lifted. Operationally and in maneuverability, it's inferior to a magic flying carpet. You might as well use the carpet's technology to make 2 shoe soles, attach them to your shoes, and modify your clothes into a gliding rig. The principle is simple, and it would meet your needs. Bai Luan thought of the wind glider he'd seen on Heita space station. The suggestion was sensible, but he shook his head. No, I still want to follow my original idea. Tell me why. Heita put a hand on her hip, radiating an undeniable presence. My suggestion is simpler and less difficult. Bai Luan squared his shoulders and said in mock solemnity, because I think a flying backpack is cooler. If not for technological limits, he'd launch straight away in a Gundam pose. If he could pilot a mech and roam the universe, this life would be worth dying for. Heita allowed a smile and said, You have personality, but having the delusions of a genius without the talent of one can be rough. Conversely, maybe this is the first step to becoming a genius? I have to say, that perspective is pretty genius-like, Heita admitted. Don't say that. I'll get conceited. Being optimistic is fine, she said after a moment. I don't object. He was ready for mockery. Instead, she surprised him. For me, success is commonplace. I used to think it was boring for mortals to bang their heads against little problems over and over. But watching you hit walls, collapse, lose your mind, and then, like an unkillable cockroach, painstakingly dig a tiny success out of the rubble. She tilted her head as if observing a new cosmic phenomenon. Tsk, it's actually quite interesting. Her gaze, usually clinical, softened into something like curiosity. I'm starting to understand the god of fun a little. Bai Luan looked at the genius beside him. It seems that, in the eyes of a genius, the clumsy manner of a mortal slowly crawling, he spoke softly, finishing the thought, can also become a kind of scenery. Though in reality, a genius wouldn't bother to stoop and admire such a sight. 11. Now that things have come to this, let's eat first. Bai Luan snapped out of his thoughts in the little black room. His hand was still resting on the instrument. This thing is called an internal structure scanner. You place the item you want to analyze beneath it, activate the device, and it maps the object's internal structure. There are size limits. Whatever you scan can't be bigger than a computer host, but that hardly diminishes how powerful it is. He opened the cabinet under the bench and stared at the projection equipment stored inside for who knew how long. Once a scan finishes, you can project the blueprint with this gear. You can zoom in and out at will, and every tiny detail of the scanned object can be reproduced. This is incredible. Capture an enemy weapon, scan it, and you get its blueprint instantly. Simple weapons could be replicated directly. Even if you don't fully understand the principles, you can still build according to the plans. If your own tech is more advanced, you could study the weapon's principles, replicate it, and develop countermeasures. Some labs even have printers. Scan, feed the blueprint in, and an identical replica assembles itself. There are dozens of such instruments in this one laboratory alone, each more astounding than the last. This set of tools could decide the outcome of a battlefield, and yet at Heita's, it's just another instrument in a casually established lab, probably dormant for who knows how long. Devices that could overturn the world are gathering dust here. The more he learned, the more Bai Luan realized how small he was confronted with genius. He closed the cabinet without taking anything out. There weren't many raw materials in this lab. Although he'd tinkered the flying backpack together here in the little black room, this was reality. He only learned how to make the backpack in the room and gained manufacturing experience. The materials still had to be obtained himself. His studies in the little black room had been a bit lazy this trip. He'd focused on using the instruments rather than learning their operating principles. Any one of the instruments held enough theoretical knowledge to crush a person several times over if laid out. Even with the room's help, it would take years of study to fully understand them. Such a life would be too grueling. He preferred to take things slowly. Still, Bai Luan had no trouble working as a researcher in this lab and conducting small experiments. The strange, unknown devices were beginning to feel familiar. Seeing them, his mind automatically supplied their uses and functions. It felt like coming home. Knowledge flowed into his head. It was a wonderful feeling. To someone who had only just stepped into this lab 5 minutes earlier, his confidence would seem absurd. But only Bai Luan, the system, and Heita in the little black room knew how much effort had gone into it. All right, not so lonely after all. This trip had been fruitful. Time to go. Aha watched, baffled by the simple sequence. Enter lab, browse for 5 minutes, walk out satisfied. Aha eventually filed it under peculiar behavior unique to geniuses. Patient as he was, Aha still wanted to see what kind of spectacle this brat, the one who dared to pin blame on him, might stage next. Bai Luan could have put on a show that would have thrilled Aha with a single line. You, a dignified Aeon, spying on me, a mere mortal? That would have stunned Aha. After all, Aha had once disguised himself as an ordinary person and hidden on Akavili's train, keeping the disguise for a long time without being found. Yet here he was, detected while spying on a mortal. Would Aha have been amused? Probably not. He might have just handed Bai Luan a trailblaze envoy as a toy. So Bai Luan kept that line as a trump card to play if he was ever being chased and desperately needed power. Then he could unleash a burst of trailblaze energy and enjoy himself. Heh, who could outwit me? The Aeon of Trailblaze should be toyed with like this. While the masked fools still guessed at Aha's intentions, the true followers of Trailblaze were already plotting against him. Bai Luan stepped out of the laboratory. The valve behind him hissed closed. His stomach growled. In his previous life as a struggling worker, he'd rarely eaten breakfast. So after arriving at Heita's, he'd skipped it too. It was now noon, and he'd been running around, so hunger was catching up. I need to find something to eat. He rubbed his chin and started to look for the kitchen in Heita's vast residence. The nearest kitchen seemed large. Who cares, as long as it can cook? Off he went. After half an hour of walking, he finally reached the kitchen. He wiped his forehead when he saw the sign. A mode of transport is urgently needed. He'd only been here 2 days, but he already appreciated the importance of transport to human life. The kitchen that opened before him was enormous, almost the size of 2 cafeteria halls. Sinks, cutting boards, rows of gleaming chef's knives, humming appliances, every conceivable cooking tool, and many he couldn't even name, were lined up like soldiers on inspection. Filming a food video here and simply showing off the arsenal would make viewers click in awe. But Herta's kitchen was more than its size. Its uniqueness came from a complete food production system. Ingredients grew in the area adjacent to the kitchen and flowed in on silent conveyor belts. The belts weren't running now, perhaps they only turned on when Herta felt like cooking, but in the production fields, small Hertas were hard at work. These little Hertas were tiny, sprite-like, capable of flight. Let's call them sprite Hertas. Some raised chickens, some tended cows, some picked fruit, some watered plants. A farm right next to the kitchen. Grand gesture. He wondered if he could take ingredients without permission and decided he'd better ask. He stepped into the production area. Several sprite Hertas zipped over, circling and staring. Can I have some ingredients?" The sprites nodded, still studying him intently. "So they're asking what I want," he thought. Potatoes, peas, rice, meat." He listed the ingredients he needed while imagining the meal he wanted to cook. The sprites flew off and soon returned, each carrying fresh supplies. They delivered everything thoughtfully to the kitchen. "Thank you all." They waved and went back to their posts. Bai Luan checked the ingredients briefly, all top-notch quality. He rolled up his sleeves. Such good ingredients shouldn't be wasted. Vegetables went into the sink. The cutting board clicked under practiced knife work. The wok hissed as he tossed and stir-fried. He plated 3 dishes and a soup. Braised pork with potatoes, kung pao chicken, stir-fried pork with green peppers, and a simple egg drop soup. Rice from the cooker, chopsticks in hand. Time to eat. He picked up a glossy piece of green pepper with shredded pork, grabbed a mouthful of rice, and put it in his mouth. Holy crap, how is this so delicious? Bai Luan stared at the spread in front of him. In his old life, he'd eaten at many high-end restaurants, but none of them compared to these home-cooked dishes. Had his cooking technique improved? No, his skills were just decent. The ingredients? Could it be that? A label glowed briefly in his mind. Curio, extremely delicious kung pao chicken. Effect, an ordinary home-cooked meal, but even the most discerning gourmet will praise its deliciousness after eating it. Heh, so it had turned into a curio. By the way, was it okay to eat a curio? He shrugged, shoved another mouthful of rice into his mouth, and decided that since things had come to this, chew, he might as well eat first. Chew. I've learned so much. Having eaten his fill, he cleaned up everything he had used, packed the leftover food, and solved his own dinner problem at the same time. But Bai Luan frowned at the 2-person portion in his hands. He hadn't cooked in ages, and carried away by hunger and enthusiasm, had made far too much. 1 box would be his dinner. What to do with the other? Throwing food away felt disgraceful. Keeping it overnight for breakfast felt excessive. Was there a refrigerator AI here? With a kitchen this large and well-equipped, there had to be one. Bai Luan set off through the cavernous kitchen with the 2 packed bento boxes. This corner for desserts and cakes, that section for pasta, over there for skewers and deep frying in the far bay. The scale of the place was ridiculous. If enough people lived here, you could open an entire food street inside. He was grumbling about Herta's habit of building extravagant facilities on a whim and then ignoring them when she moved on, when something purple in the depths of the wall caught his eye. A purple refrigerator. Perfect. He walked over cheerfully and reached to open the door, then froze when an electronic voice cut in. "Who are you?" The voice came from nowhere. Bai Luan looked around and then heard it again, more offended this time. "Take your hand off my face!" Confused, he let go of the door and a dark blue dot appeared where his palm had been. The AI's sensor, its face. Why would a refrigerator need an AI? Next to it was an ingredient production line that dispensed supplies on demand. Preservation didn't seem necessary. Maybe there was some rare treasure inside, ancient ginseng, a relic, a prehistoric turtle? I'll ask again. Who are you? Why are you trying to open me? "Oh, I'm Bai Luan. I just used the kitchen to cook and I made too much. I wanted to put 1 portion in here." He held up 1 bento to show the AI. "Cooking? People cook here?" the refrigerator asked, incredulous. "Since Miss Herta lost interest in cooking, I haven't seen a living person prepare a meal in ages." So it had mostly been Herta or her puppets cooking. Bai Luan wondered what level Herta's culinary curiosity had ever reached. He gestured toward the box. "By the way, how good is your preservation ability?" That casual question sent the AI into a proud fit. It trembled slightly, then declared, How dare you question my professional abilities? So you're very good then? Of course, I'm exceptional at preservation. My internal structure uses unparalleled technology. Whatever state something enters me in, that is how it comes out. The oldest dessert I've stored is older than you are, and if you take it out, it tastes as if it just came from the oven. After the morning's string of surprises, the flying carpet, the botanical garden, the lab, Bai Luan wasn't easily rattled by claims like that. He just smiled and asked, "Can I put this bento in now?" The AI's tone shifted, half haughty, half officious. "You're not allowed to store anything without a trial. Miss Heita has imported extensive, deliciousness-based data parameters into me. I'm her food arbiter. If the food you made doesn't meet my standards, it is not qualified to be stored. I guard Miss Heita's taste buds." That earnest conviction was comical and oddly touching. Before Bai Luan could reply, several mechanical arms extended from the refrigerator, and one reached for the bento. He reflexively slapped it away from the other box in his hand. "Don't touch my dinner. I'm only putting one in." Humph, such arrogance. Maybe not even one will be allowed. The arm that had taken the bento delivered it to the AI's front. A scanning light flashed from its eye and swept the box up and down. The little blue dot creased itself in concentration. Bai Luan watched with mild curiosity. He was interested to see what rating his casual home cooking would get. Wait, this can't be 10, no, 9 parts are wrong, the AI muttered, baffled, then abruptly brightened. "Your food has been rated the best meal by my inspection system." Bai Luan blinked. The AI's standards, it seemed, were easily impressed, or covertly generous. He imagined how amazing his dishes could become with time in the little black room. Sparkling effects, miraculous healing properties, perhaps clothes-rending enthusiasm from diners. That last image made him flush, probably best not to tempt fate. "I retract my earlier presumptuousness. You are a respectable chef," the AI concluded. The mechanical arm carefully fastened the bento, then, with all the pomp of carrying a palanquin, slipped it into the refrigerator. When the door opened, Bai Luan saw why the AI had boasted. The interior was far larger than the exterior suggested. The unit used space-related technology. Vertically and horizontally, it seemed endless. Rows of delicacies were packed in every direction, a treat hoard so vast that desserts could sit unclaimed for centuries and still remain pristine. The arm tucked his bento into the optimal compartment. The door clicked shut, and the AI added, "I hope you will cook more often and add more delicacies to my storage." Bai Luan, more interested in taking the refrigerator apart to study its spatial tech than in contributing to its cache, suddenly felt his pocket vibrate. His phone, the 4 o'clock reminder, and it told him it was time to go back to his room. Relief flooded him. Rest. He needed to lie down. He had learned far too much in one day. He left the kitchen while the refrigerator returned to idle. Later, a few Heita puppets approached it and tapped the panel to wake it. "Is Miss Heita going to have dinner?" one asked. It wasn't widely known, but the refrigerator AI maintained an internal hierarchy. All compartments preserved equally well, but their assessed deliciousness ranged from best to worst. Miss Heita always reached for the topmost delicacies. The bottom-stored items simply waited. They wouldn't spoil. Mechanical arms selected what the AI currently judged the most appropriate dish for Heita's meal: Bai Luan's bento. According to the data, this bento box is most suitable for Miss Heita's dinner. A boxed bento, packaged in a generic container? Heita frowned at the presentation and suspected a bug in her program. She opened the box anyway. The puppets handed her chopsticks, and she surveyed the 3 dishes and a soup inside. "The presentation isn't bad," she said, then picked up a bit of diced chicken and tasted it. "Oh my, this is quite tasty," she murmured. "My program really wouldn't be at fault." While Heita ate her bento with her usual poise, Bai Luan tore into his in a hurry. He finished in no time, rinsed the dishes at the newly installed wash basin, shook the water from his hands, and sat back on the bed. The room had been remodeled beyond recognition. "It actually doubled in size," he said, staring at the renovation. "You'd never guess they only started this morning. Miss Heita really is incredible." There was no sign of the construction work. Everything he'd left in place before he stepped out remained exactly where it had been. The robots had somehow worked around his mess and even carved out a private bathroom. It was astonishing. Staying here had been the right call. He congratulated himself quietly, then turned to work. The treatment they were giving him was excellent, and if he wanted to keep it, he couldn't afford to be kicked out. He opened the file he'd compiled, a list of everything needed to fix the botanical garden problem. Heita's reputation as a tough, inscrutable boss made him pause. She demanded excellence and dismissed mistakes without hesitation, but she never skimped on benefits. Anticipating a superior's mood was practically part of the job. Should he send the list straight to the Heita puppet or butter her up first with some smooth talk? Flattery often worked with dog-like bosses, but Heita probably didn't care for that. In the end, he decided to be direct. He opened the chat app and uploaded the file. Miss Heita, these items are needed to solve the botanical garden problem. A moment later, 2 short replies popped up. Adapting so quickly? It seems I underestimated you. I should have taken you to a few more places. Relief flooded him. The messages suggested she'd looked it over favorably. Then, the chat went quiet while the file showed as received and presumably being reviewed. Anxiety crept back in, like waiting for a teacher to grade your homework in front of the whole class. He couldn't be sure how she'd judge his work. In his last life, hard work didn't always pay off. His phone buzzed again. I've looked at the file. No issues. Heita recommends a procurement and transport robot to you. From now on, just send any materials you need directly to it. No need to show me. If you need daily necessities, add them to the procurement list and buy them together. Everything is focused on solving the botanical garden problem. You don't need to worry about the procurement budget. Bai Luan exhaled. Heita wasn't some distant, stingy boss. Things here really were different. I understand. He added the procurement robot Heita recommended. As he was about to send the file to it, another message from Heita appeared. Heita, oh right, good job. Something like warmth swelled in him. He felt a little ridiculous, but genuinely pleased. If he'd had a leader like this in his old life, he might have pledged loyalty on the spot. Miss Heita is great, no need to say more. Heita didn't reply after that. With the Heita puppet silent, he turned his attention to the procurement robot. Miss Heita told me to come. She said to just give you the list. Procurement robot. Estimated arrival tomorrow. An okay emoji. Bai Luan's mouth twitched. Efficient as always. He checked the map, found the procurement department wasn't far, maybe a half-hour's run, and planned to go tomorrow. With the botanical garden issue moving forward, he turned to the pile of boxes he'd left in the corner. Only a day had passed, but Bai Luan felt like a different person from the night before. What had been clutter in his eyes then might not be clutter anymore. He opened one of the boxes he'd already started yesterday. Inside were white metal panels, each perfectly cut and identical in size, heavy too. Yesterday, not knowing the material, he'd dismissed them as junk. Last night's version of him would have labeled everything a mess. Today, he was more careful. If they could be used for a flying backpack, he could actually build one. He muttered a thanks to the little black room of the system. System, little black room, I am not the sole reason for your progress. Don't forget to thank yourself. Of course, I'm awesome too, Bai Luan grinned and opened the procurement app's image identification function. He took a photo of a panel. The app scanned, then returned a result. Panem alloy? He checked the price. A string of zeros made his heart stop. Ones, tens, hundreds, millions? How much? Millions per panel. He stared at the box in disbelief. One box could easily be worth 10 million. He looked at the rest of the stack, his clutter, and tried to calculate how many credit points that might be. Heita's casual spending was absurd. She was handing out pay worth more than entire lives. It was terrifying and surreal. He calmed himself. Compared to other things he'd seen over the past 2 days, these panels were probably ordinary. Stealing a lab instrument, for instance, would be dozens of times pricier. These were trivial in that context. Bai Luan checked the alloy's uses online and came to the obvious conclusion. Expensive things only have one drawback: they're expensive. The panels were suitable for the flying backpack. Now he just needed access to the lab for other materials. He got up and started sifting through the rest of the blind boxes. Prices varied. Many started in the 5 digits, and as he went, he became numb. Some items could be used for the backpack. Others were just expensive oddities. He sorted useful parts into a pile and put the rest away. When he was done, he wiped sweat from his brow. The materials he couldn't use, he'd add to the botanical garden's procurement list later, though he'd check prices carefully and delay putting the truly pricey items on the list until he had a plan. After a shower, changing into pajamas, washing his clothes, and hanging them to dry, he lay back on the bed and stared at the sorted components. I wonder what abilities the backpack will have once it's forged into a wondrous item. A flash of white caught his eye. The paper airplane he'd folded earlier, carelessly dropped and overlooked while he moved boxes. He hadn't stepped on it. Lucky. He picked it up and set it on the wooden table. This could be his first wondrous item, he thought, and the idea amused him. He took a fresh sheet of paper and folded a crane. "It's been a long time," he murmured. "My skill hasn't slipped." He poked the paper crane with a finger. It flapped its wings and rose into the air. Bai Luan froze, heart pounding, watching it flutter like a living bird. After a moment, he read the system notification as if from a game. "Wondrous item, paper crane. It's alive! It's alive!" It lived without even using electroshock therapy. Who's going to fill my need for a Frankenstein here? Yes, it's alive. You created life, but other than that, it has no abilities. 14. You can't hide for long. I'd expected absurd things, but not this absurd. Bai Luan stared at the paper crane perched on his hand and had no words. Ruan Mei had spent years in labs, researching and designing life. Bai Luan had done it with a single sheet of paper. It was ridiculous. Whoever was watching him must be applauding the irony. He scratched his head, worry crossing his face. How was he supposed to handle this? He couldn't exactly say he'd created a living thing. Ruan Mei's work was deliberate and documented. She knew how to make life. What he had was a fluke, a product of the system's strange gift, and therefore dangerously exposed. If Heita decided to investigate and he stammered, there would be no way to keep them from suspecting he wasn't a product of abundance. He couldn't let Heita know about the crane, at least not yet, or she'd want to dissect him. He needed a plan. Maybe he could steer the Heita puppets toward thinking he was researching drones and biomimicry. That would make a living paper crane seem like a clever piece of engineering. But what if Heita used inspection tools and found no circuitry inside? The thought made him stare helplessly at the tiny origami bird in his palm. What do you eat? What do you do? It occurred to him. Maybe he should just ask Heita. In an instant, he was in the little black room. Heita closed his botanical garden notebook and looked around, then realized where she was. "It's evening," she observed, and with a decided air walked straight to his slightly messy bed and sat down as though it were a throne, smoothing her skirt into a practiced crease. "Miss Heita, I have a question," Bai Luan blurted. "If I suddenly created life right in front of you, what would you do?" Heita gave him a look that clearly said, "Bana, are you crazy?" then went back to the notebook. It annoyed Bai Luan. He'd only written one day's notes, but the miniature chibi-style Heita he doodled in the margins always made her pick it up. She told herself she wasn't going to read it in front of him, but every time he left, she'd steal a page. Eventually, she stopped pretending it didn't interest her. As a genius, why care about others' opinions? "You called them childish," Bai Luan muttered, slightly embarrassed that his childish drawings were getting such serious attention. Heita turned a page with no change in her expression. "This is inspection. Fine, but my question isn't nonsense." "Oh," she closed the book, now genuinely interested. "You created life?" "Yes. I folded a paper crane, and it came to life." "From a single sheet of paper?" "Yes." "Folded into a crane?" "Yes." "And then it was alive?" Heita rolled her eyes and reopened the notebook. "Do you expect me to believe you? It's some system ability, right?" "Exactly. Next time, just say so faster." She closed the notebook again and looked at him, curious. "You really created life?" "Of course. Look," he said. "I don't even have the crane here now. If it hadn't worked, it would still be in this room." And her tone was flat as a ruler. "Are you asking me to pop a bottle of champagne?" she said with a faint, playful curve to her lips. "Because that's not very likely. No, I want to know what you'd do to me if you found out. When the system made me, you nearly dissected me." "I told you I was teasing." Heita blinked. "How could a genius like me be cruel? Did I scare you?" Bai Luan brightened. So even if you saw a paper crane turn into a living thing, you wouldn't dissect me? Herta considered seriously for a moment. Hard to say. His smile fell. For an instant he registered, subtle as a twitch, the corner of Herta's mouth lifting, an almost invisible grin of someone amused at a successful prank. Are you making fun of me? He snapped. Exposed, Herta didn't look embarrassed. She met his gaze and with the faintest lift of her chin, looked pleased with herself. Admit it. This is fun. All right, give me the serious answer, he pressed. Okay, the serious answer. Don't worry so much. Miss Herta is very busy. Unless you leap out and scream about being extraordinary, I won't be obsessing over you. If you try to make yourself conspicuous, though, forget I said anything. She flashed a teasing smile. If you tell me everything, I'll happily study you. I really don't want to be studied, he said. Then keep it hidden, unless one day you can't. And if this genius finds you then, well, you should worry. Actually, you should probably worry now. I have a very good eye for discovery. Then I'll stay hidden until I can stand on my own 2 feet. Just be ordinary, he decided. You can't hide for long, she said. Are you that confident? Of course. I am Herta. Heh? I'll hide it just to prove you wrong, he thought, already forming an unspoken competition. Act like a genius, but not like too much of one. He might be brilliant. He didn't have to advertise it. Back in reality, the paper crane, vibrant and alive, flapped its wings in his palm. Relieved there was no immediate danger, Bai Luan reached out and stroked its head with his index finger. I'll bring you to the botanical garden. You can live there and move around. The crane regarded him and nodded. Bai Luan hesitated, then said, When you see other people, act like a normal paper crane, okay? Another nod. Keeping a small Chihiro didn't seem like such a bad plan. You'll be called Chihiro. He didn't know what it ate. Paper? He'd worry about that tomorrow. He stretched, ready for bed, and his eyes fell on the paper airplane he'd made earlier. He glanced between Chihiro and the airplane. An idea sparked. The airplane's ability could win any contest. Why not race them? Chihiro, race this paper airplane, he urged. Chihiro shot up, eager. Bai Luan picked up the airplane and counted down. On 3, Chihiro launched. Bai Luan tossed the airplane lightly, and something impossible happened. The airplane didn't arc like a normal plane. It ripped forward like a bolt of white lightning, as if space itself had flung it. With a single whoosh, it closed the distance and hovered exactly 1 sharp nose cone ahead of Chihiro. No matter how Chihiro accelerated or twisted, the airplane stayed perfectly positioned, never letting the crane shake it off. Conceptual God, Bai Luan breathed. He began thinking of uses. If Chihiro stayed with him and the paper airplane could always find him, then by handing the airplane to someone else, he could make it return to him from anywhere with a simple toss. Practical, even if the world was now connected to the internet. The airplane could be a backup method of contact. He comforted Chihiro, who was miffed at losing, and lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling with unfocused eyes. Not long before, he'd been staring at the pale, clinical ceiling of a hospital room, the air thick with disinfectant. A small, almost ethereal smile crept onto his face. His second day in the Honkai Star Rail world had gone well. Slowly he closed his eyes and let sleep come. What he had thought about during the day followed him into dreams. Neon city lights, cold machinery. The scent of disinfectant stubbornly pricked at his nostrils once more. Late-stage liver cancer. You don't have much time. The doctor opposite him said it with the kind of gravity that made everything feel brittle. The thin diagnostic report slipped from Bai Luan's fingers and fluttered to the floor like a withered leaf. Premature. Absolute. He burned paper money at his relatives' graves one by one. The little flames licked at the gateway to the afterlife and cast a soft, pitiless light over the dry smiles etched into the stones, his parents who had worked themselves to death, his grandparents who'd raised him and never lived long enough to be repaid. He'd promised them he'd make something of himself. He'd worked for it his whole life. For what? He probably wouldn't even see next year. I'm gonna die. Next year, who would sweep their graves? He gripped a handful of unburnt joss money and hurled it into the gray sky. The papers scattered on the wind like a sad, scattered blessing. Back at his rented room, he'd quit his job and emptied a decade of savings, neat stacks of red banknotes on the floor. He picked one bundle up, turned it over in his hands. It wasn't just cash, it was the first half of his life. Screw it. He decided to live clearly for once. He'd been frugal his whole life, now he wanted sweetness. He threw the bundle into the air and watched the notes fan out like fireworks. He spun around as they fell, laughing a little, the laugh forced and brittle. From now on, do whatever I want. He ate at buffets he'd never have dared before, drank freely, danced in clubs under frantic lights, lost himself in the crowd. He blew money on gacha in Honkai Star Rail, pulling for characters he liked without a plan. A man with no future didn't need savings. How happy. He was so happy. It all broke apart in the bathroom of an expensive hotel. A cough and a mouthful of bright blood filled his hand. Pain folded him over. He crawled to the sink. The mirror showed a face gone pale and hollow, sweat slicking his hair to his forehead. For the last month, he'd been living like a movie, spending 10,000 a day. Why couldn't he feel content? He used 2 fingers to force his cheeks up into a smile, an ugly, empty smile. What do I really want? He mouthed. Another wave of pain, and then blackness. When he woke, he was in a hospital bed, in a patient gown, an IV in his arm. A voice came from the next bed, middle-aged, hoarse but bright with surprise. You're awake? Finally, the woman said, pressing the call bell. She fussed over him like she was startled out of a habit of worry. Bai Luan, half listless, mumbled a thank you just to fill the silence. Seeing his face, the woman grew earnest. There's still a chance, she said. You can't give up. Life goes on as long as you don't give up. He smiled a hollow smile. You're right. He lay back. His phone was on the bedside table. Its battery icon was a small red bar. He reached for his charger, which he couldn't find. Damn that hotel, he vowed silently. He opened Alipay and stared at his balance. After a month of blowing money, he still had 101,256.3 yuan. What now? Could he spend it all on gacha? The woman leaned over and asked, Were you looking for a charger? I've got one. Not sure if it fits, though. He glanced at it. It fit. He hesitated, looked at his phone, and took it. Thanks. This one felt sincere. Do you have cancer too? She asked after a beat. Yes, he said. So young. How? Bad luck, he said with a self-mocking shrug. The woman gave a small, awkward laugh. Soon the doctor, the same one who had delivered the verdict, arrived with a nurse and gave the clinical rundown again. Bai Luan listened without interest and then said, very simply, I'm not going to treat it. The doctor's face went still. His breath left him in a heavy, helpless sound. He and the nurse exchanged looks and left wordlessly. The woman in the next bed blurted, Why won't you treat it? Think of your family. They're gone, Bai Luan interrupted, voice flat as thrown stone. All of them. He turned away, shutting himself off. The woman's body shook as she tried to hold it together. Then small, suppressed sobs betrayed her. She wiped her face with a rough hand and admitted in a trembling voice, I'm scared. Everyone says this disease is serious. I don't know if. You can be cured. Don't give up, he said, and the words cut into him as much as into her. A knock and a child's voice bubbled through. Grandma. Mom, I brought Wanjuan to see you. The woman smoothed herself into a smile as a little girl ran in. The child hugged her grandmother and chirped, Get well soon, Grandma. The woman stroked the child's hair and promised, Grandma will be fine soon. Watching them, Bai Luan kept an eye on his phone as the charger did its work. The battery crept from red to green. He seemed to know already where the rest of his money should go. He unplugged the charger, stood, and passed it back. Thanks for the charger. The woman protested, But you just started charging it. He shrugged and said, It's enough. The battery was green. He'd be discharged. The little girl tilted her head and asked with childlike bluntness, Big brother, is your illness cured? Bai Luan crouched, ran a hand over her head, and gave her a warm, certain smile. Yes, it's cured. Big brother's all right now. He looked over at the grandmother as if making a promise. Your grandma will be well too. The woman said, hope visible in the way she straightened. He found the doctor and asked about the woman in the next bed. How's she? He said. She's in early stages, the doctor answered. There's a lot of hope, if she can afford the follow-up treatments. Her family's finances are terrible. Bai Luan's voice was quiet and steady. I have 100,000 left on my card. After you take care of my expenses, please use the rest for her. The doctor stared. I'm a goner, Bai Luan said plainly. That money won't make a ripple for me anywhere else, but it could buy her a chance. He paused, then looked up at the hazy hospital skylight and smiled, small, resigned. As for me, let heaven decide. And so his last savings, warm with the residue of a life, were put toward another person's future. The doctor tried to argue, but Bai Luan insisted on being discharged. Before he left, the doctor called after him, eyes wet. At least, let me do something for you? Bai Luan turned. He thought for a moment and then smiled, telling the doctor where his family's old graves were. If she gets better, he said, please sweep my family's graves for me every year. He waved, turned, and walked out of the hospital toward whatever came next. Evening crowds swarmed the streets without noticing him. He walked under the glow of a billboard advertising Heita and felt a brief, silly thought. If he lived in that world, would his disease be trivial and treatable? He shook his head. Grandparents, Mom, Dad, he said into the dusk. I didn't make it big, but I didn't live in vain. A sharp knife of pain from his liver folded him over. He stumbled to a bench and sat. He understood, suddenly and painfully, why blowing money had never filled the hole inside him. Those pleasures had been nothing but distractions. What he'd really wanted was to live, not spectacle, but the right to be afraid, to fight, to cling to that small, stubborn hope that maybe life would go on. The ant in the next bed had that. A home to return to, a grandchild to hold. He'd wanted a single thing, one more chance, and the world had given him none. Life blurred. His eyelids drooped. I don't want to die. Ding-a-ling-a-ling. Ding-a-ling-a-ling. His phone alarm dragged him back. The dream shattered with the chime. He sat up in his own bed, pulse quick, the echo of that other life pressing on him like a bruise. He felt solid and whole. His body felt right. System, he said into the quiet testing. What's wrong? A dry, familiar voice answered. Nothing. He stretched until his joints popped. Sunlight poured across his face, warm and ordinary. A real, unforced smile spread across his lips. I just wanted to thank you again. 16. It's broken. I got caught. After getting out of bed, Bai Luan washed his face and stared at his impossibly handsome reflection in the mirror. Buddy, you're unbelievably good-looking. He raised an eyebrow and answered himself. I know. System, crazy. Ignoring the system's little jab about his vanity, Bai Luan waved. Chihiro, come here. Chihiro flapped its wings and landed on his hand. Bai Luan slipped it into his pocket. Wait until I take you to the botanical garden. Come out only when I call. Chihiro nodded and burrowed into the dark fabric. Bai Luan ran out of his house and started warming up on the doorstep. He had planned yesterday to jog to the supplies office and pick up the deliveries in person. Discipline leads to a better self, he reminded himself, smiling as he jogged according to the map in his head. The smile disappeared when he reached the supplies kiosk and saw the distribution robot. He stared in disbelief. What do you mean the supplies have already been sent to the botanical garden? Purchased supplies are sent directly to their destination. You don't need to collect them in person, the TV head robot replied. So you're saying I woke up early, ran all the way here from home, and all the sweat and time I spent were for nothing? The robot's electronic eyes blinked. I don't understand what nothing means. If you mean a wasted effort, then I believe so. Bai Luan's mouth twitched. He tried to console himself. At least I got some exercise. That doesn't change that your trip was wasted, and you didn't have to get up this early. The distribution robot pressed the point. On top of that, you still have to run back now. Bai Luan flinched. Then the robot added, mercilessly, you haven't had breakfast yet, have you? Stop, stop, that's enough. Why are you a robot still attacking me? Sir, I am a supplies distribution robot, model DL7. My core program does not include an emotional care module. Bai Luan scowled. The TV head's electronic face changed into a sullen emoticon. Equals. Is your intelligence level insufficient to possess even a basic degree of emotional intelligence? No, sir. My emotional analysis module is rated B+. The robot's screen flashed, but I cannot violate the core principle of logic, honesty. You may invent excuses to save face, but I must adhere to principles. Who said I was making excuses? Sir, I have the previous recording. You said you were here to pick up goods. Must you be so ruthless? The electronic eyes flickered into a helpless little face. Playback recording cleared, sir. Have a pleasant morning exercise. Bai Luan stood there, speechless for a moment, then said with exaggerated determination, "I'll still run here tomorrow." "Why?" "Because I said so. I am self-disciplined." The distribution robot watched him go and muttered to its own log, "Why are humans so stubborn with their mouths while I am a robot?" It didn't bother logging the incident further. Its logic unit judged the chance Bai Luan would actually return to be low. Bai Luan felt a little down about his wasted trip, but his mood lifted when he arrived at the botanical garden and saw the neat rows of newly delivered packages. Time to unbox. He disinfected his hands, opened each box, and took out small magical tools and supplies he would need. After checking every item twice, he set to work as a gardener. Bai Luan wove through the botanical garden, fertilizing giant potatoes, carefully applying medicine to a morose black rose, and picking diseased teeth from flowers that, bizarrely, had teeth at their centers. The enormous black rose inclined toward him and opened wide. Bai Luan plucked off a damaged leaf and dabbed medicine on the wound. "Good. With this, you'll recover soon." The rose closed its petals, and a bud brushed against his hand in gratitude. Bai Luan stroked it. "Once you're well again, you'll be just like your companions." The rose seemed to brighten at that, the dark color at its edges taking on a faint blue hue. Blue roses represent friendship, Bai Luan thought with a satisfied nod, and left the rose garden. Life should be healthy and well. He crouched next to the Inspiration Shroom, the MVP translator from yesterday. "Good morning, Inspiration Shroom." "Good morning, Shroom," the mushroom chimed. "Can you repeat that thing from yesterday?" "Inspiration Guli Guli Watcha Inspiration Shroom." "Today's Inspiration Shroom." "Get!" Bai Luan grinned. He loved teaching it silly sounds. The shroom's ethereal, girlish voice made even nonsense charming. What strange sound should he try today? He decided on something playful. "Inspiration Shroom, repeat after me. Goo goo gaga." "Shroom, shroom, gaga, shroom." "Can you drop the last shroom?" "I'll try. Shroom. Cuff, cuff." The shroom coughed twice, then shouted, "Shroom, shroom, gaga." Its whole body trembled as if struggling against underlying code constraints. "Shroom." It gave up, embarrassed. "Can't do it, Shroom." "All right, I know you tried." "Oh, I almost forgot." Bai Luan pulled Chihiro out of his pocket. The little creature shook itself, took in the new surroundings with curious eyes, and fluttered up. "What is that, Shroom?" It's a creation, just like you," Inspiration Shroom said. "A scientific creation, Shroom? I didn't know you were a scientist, Shroom." "I don't know if it's scientific, but it is my creation," the Shroom replied, thinking very hard and then deciding not to worry about the details. Some things a mushroom didn't need to fully understand. Bai Luan looked at Chihiro and said, "You'll live here from now on." He hesitated, thinking about food. If Chihiro ate ordinary things the botanical garden could provide, it would be fine. But Chihiro wasn't ordinary. Would it eat normal food? System. It will take care of itself. "It's my creation," Bai Luan muttered. "I can't just abandon it. Freedom is the best gift you can give it, just like me and you. Visit it often." "All right, you've convinced me." Compared to the system nagging him to complete tasks, this free-range approach felt nicer. Bai Luan glanced at the happily flying Chihiro. If the system said it was fine, then it should be fine. Oh, right, there was one more thing he needed to tell it. He lowered his voice. "If you see a beautiful Gothic-style brown-haired girl puppet wearing a beret with purple lilies, a collar around her neck, and a purple-gray dress trimmed with lace, remember to pretend to be an ordinary paper crane." As soon as he finished speaking, Chihiro froze midair and fell. Bai Luan caught it instinctively and looked down at the paper crane in his hand, puzzled. "What? What's wrong with you?" "Did you just talk about me?" a familiar voice asked from behind. Bai Luan turned slowly and saw the Heita puppet, who had appeared without his noticing. She stood expressionless, one slender wooden arm elegantly propped on her hip. Her deep purple eyes, as if holding the mysteries of the galaxy, regarded him calmly. "What is wrong with seeing me?" she asked. Bai Luan felt the pressure of being exposed. Damn it, he'd been caught. Take it apart and have a look? Bai Luan's mind raced. Yesterday, in the little black room, Miss Heita had promised she wouldn't dissect him, on the condition he didn't cause trouble. This was now a direct, face-to-face encounter. He did not want to be examined by Miss Heita. He felt a small panic, but on the surface he kept his composure, steady as an old hand. Well, he stammered. I just saw this little thing flying. Did you make it? The Herta puppet asked. The puppet's question sparked an idea. Bai Luan forced his face into a casual smile. Didn't I see Miss Herta's magic carpet a while ago? I studied it a bit and tried to copy a few tricks. I made this little thing, but my craftsmanship isn't great, so it only flies for a short time and can't hover. That's why it fell. Oh, really? The Herta puppet raised an eyebrow and inspected the paper crane in Bai Luan's hand. Show me. Bai Luan turned and glanced at the paper crane. He silently prayed Chihiro would cooperate. He tossed it into the air. Chihiro rose, but instead of flapping its wings like before, it hovered perfectly motionless, its wings still. Perfect. Not flapping made it look far less biological and far more like a crafted gadget. After a brief hover, Chihiro wavered, bobbed twice, and then began to fall. Bai Luan caught it. The whole display had been immaculate. Whatever skepticism he had about Chihiro taking care of itself vanished. The Herta puppet's eyes flashed with thin blue data streams as it looked at the paper crane. Was it recording? Bai Luan couldn't tell. He decided to ride the wave. As you can see, Miss Herta, this creation is not yet perfect. It has obvious flaws. One day, just from watching, and you made it? The puppet asked. No. Bai Luan shook his head, smiling. Not a genius. After you left, I went back and studied it for a long time. Of course I didn't damage the carpet. Being able to understand this genius's invention proves you have good talent, the puppet said. Not at all. Ha ha, he answered, forcing a laugh. Miss Herta's words from the little black room replayed in his head. You can't hide for long. He'd only decided yesterday to confront her there, and today he'd nearly been exposed. It seems you're adapting to the work quickly, the puppet observed. Bai Luan felt his internal work alarm go off. Excel, and you'll be given more work. Miss Herta, I still need time to adapt to this job, he said. Don't worry. Making things deliberately difficult for subordinates is the mark of incompetence. I don't have time for that. I only came to confirm you won't mess everything up here. The puppet walked Bai Luan through the botanical garden, checking his setup. No obvious problems. I'll leave this area to you. I'll check back in a few months. No problem, Bai Luan breathed. As I said, if you do the gardener's job well, you'll be allowed to stay. I won't assign you elsewhere for now. Of course, if you really want to learn more, stop one of me. Any me is qualified to teach you. Understood, Bai Luan said. I'm leaving. The puppet waved as if in casual farewell and departed as swiftly as it had come. When the Herta puppet was out of sight, Bai Luan finally exhaled. He had muddled through. Chihiro, which had been held perfectly still to play the part of a machine, relaxed and resumed its lively, biological manner. Good job, little guy, Bai Luan murmured. Chihiro tilted its head, pleased. He settled Chihiro safely among the plants and used the inspiration shroom and nearby flora to signal its presence, just in case hungry plants treated it as live prey. With that, his gardener's duties were done. According to Miss Herta's arrangement, after finishing this task, he was free. Bai Luan ran home lightly, hauled all the valuable metal plates to the nearest lab, and set to work on the flying backpack he'd been planning. The concept was simple. A swarm of nanobots normally concealed in clothing would assemble into a backpack when activated. He liked nanobots because once one design was perfected, it could be replicated endlessly. They could also reconfigure into other mechanical devices by loading different blueprints, making them economical. The hardware was no problem. Miss Herta's laboratories were among the best in the universe. The design blueprints? He'd ground them out in the little black room. Now it was time to turn virtual into real. Bai Luan moved through the lab, feeding parameters into machines, stopping now and then to check production status. The long, unused facility hummed back to life under his hands. Though this was his first real use of the equipment, he acted with the ease of someone who had been here 1,000 times, because in the little black room, he had. He could perform these steps practically blindfolded. All his little failures there had toughened him up for anything that might go wrong here. Once the machines were running, there wasn't much to do but wait. While the fabrication lines chugged and nanobots assembled, Bai Luan idly stared at the scanner. One scan could show an object's entire internal structure. Curiosity got the better of him. If he could scan something, what should he scan? He fished a pocket watch from his belongings, one of the miscellaneous trinkets Miss Heita had given him. Pocket watches were famously intricate. He set it under the scanner, activated it, and watched the device bathe the watch in blue light from every angle. A projector sprang to life across the room and displayed a three-dimensional blueprint of the watch. "Let me see your internal structure," Bai Luan muttered, playing with the projection. With a wave of his hand, the blueprint case split apart. Then the movement separated into gears, screws, springs, piece after piece until the projected components filled the lab. Bai Luan's jaw dropped. There must have been 1,000 parts. Nothing from Miss Heita's place was simple. He switched off the projection and looked down at the real pocket watch under the scanner. A bolder thought pushed its way into his mind. How about I take it apart and have a look? 18. Smash Verudo. Good news. I took apart a pocket watch that had a total of 1,549 pieces. Bad news. I can't put it back together. Bai Luan stared at the miniature mountain range of tiny gears, springs, bearings, and screws. The pile of parts towered far higher than the pocket watch ever had. At first, he'd arranged everything neatly, then given up. There simply wasn't enough desk space. He'd thought the blueprint would make disassembly and reassembly trivial. He'd been wrong. Some piece must have gone in the wrong place, displacing another. He'd missed it and kept building until he reached a point where nothing fit. Now he had to backtrack, find where the error began, and take it all apart again. That promised to take forever. I don't want to spend the night in the lab, he thought. Forget it. Enough arguing with fate. Little black room. Activate. The little black room answered, and Black Tower's familiar voice filled the space. The lab? So the flying backpack project finally gave way to something else. Black Tower peered at the scattered parts, picked up the projected dial and toyed with it between two fingers like a minor curiosity. What did you take apart? A pocket watch you threw in the junk pile. A pocket watch? She flipped the dial as if scanning a long-forgotten, unimportant diary. Can't remember exactly. Probably a cheap souvenir some family handed me after a dull banquet. Worth much. If I threw it in the junk pile, how valuable could it be? She shrugged and let the holographic dial scatter and vanish. Then again, generally speaking, some of those things aren't cheap. Did I just dismantle something worth hundreds of millions? Black Tower considered for a beat, then said flatly, It's not that cheap. I'm just saying, can you not throw away priceless things casually? What if someone like me, who doesn't know its value, picked it up and took it apart? Oh, you're self-aware, she teased. Bai Luan laughed, finding a little amusement in his misery, and went back to the workbench to sort and reassemble a section of the watch. As he carefully manipulated the fiddly pieces, he chatted. By the way, I almost got caught by you earlier. Doing what? Creating a life. Black Tower's interest peaked. Tell me everything. I want to hear the details. I took Chihiro to the botanical garden. I released it, turned around, and you were right there, watching. So you didn't go into the little black room to look it up. You actually managed to bluff your way through? Amazing as always, Miss Black Tower. You figured it out. How did you bluff your way through? She asked. That's all thanks to Chihiro. I named the creature Chihiro. Such a casual name. Casual name, but very smart. With someone to talk to, reassembling the complicated watch suddenly felt less tedious. If a tiny screw flew off or a gear was misaligned, Bai Luan merely smiled, fetched it, and kept going. Time slipped by. He lost himself in the work. Finally, he set the dial in place and sat back. I finished it. He turned and saw Black Tower watching, chin propped on her hand. He felt a twinge of guilt. He'd been chatting at first, but then gotten completely absorbed. Sorry I left you hanging. You didn't notice, she said. Notice what? He asked, puzzled. That you missed one part. She pointed to a speck of metal lying in a dark corner, no bigger than a grain of rice. Bai Luan reached for it and stared, dread spreading across his face. He'd have to disassemble, check every step, and put it back together. Pain contorted his features, and a frustrated roar escaped him. Oh no! Damn it, no, I got my lines mixed up. Never mind, oh no! His exaggerated self-banter actually made Black Tower smile. Don't be so melodramatic. She summoned the projector and casually disassembled a virtual version of the pocket watch, step by step, until she reached the exact piece he'd missed. This part's position, she tapped the tiny glowing speck in the projection. Calm as ever. Remember it? She pushed the entire exploded view into the air in front of him. Bai Luan studied it intently, engraving the sequence into his mind. I've noted it. Good. Don't repeat this mistake outside. She turned the projection off. The more you ask, the harder I make the guidance. Understood. I'll treasure every hint. Her image vanished from the little black room. Back in the lab, Bai Luan looked at the real parts on the bench. The blank panic was gone. He could now reconstruct the steps in his head. He smiled, grabbed the tweezers, and announced to no one in particular, "Super! Assembly time!" With the little black room's demonstration in his head, his hands moved with new confidence. The trickiest parts snapped into place as if by memory. When he reached the step he'd missed before, he fished the tiny bit out from its dark corner and slipped it home. If Black Tower hadn't pointed it out, he might never have noticed, or it would have taken forever. "Praise, Miss Black Tower," he muttered. The final steps went smoothly. He tightened the last screw, closed the ornate dial cover, and the watch began to tick, clear, steady, almost like a newborn heartbeat. He turned it over, inspected every edge, completely satisfied. A system note floated into his mind. Strange item, reassembled pocket watch. It listed an effect. Pauses time for 7 seconds. "I know what you're thinking," Bai Luan thought with a grin. Rudo! He half expected the universe to laugh at him for such a cliché. A pocket watch with more than 1,000 parts certainly qualified as high grade. Had he created it by reassembling it? Why not? It was good enough. He pressed the delicate button on the side. Light flooded the watch. The fine markings on the dial shifted and reformed like living things until 7 faint, evenly spaced symbols glowed around the face. The hands began to move along those new marks. The hum of lab equipment, the trickle of liquids in tubes, even dust motes drifting in the air. All the rhythms of time stuttered and then stopped. Absolute silence wrapped the room, as if the world had been put on pause and plunged into a still, dead hush. Bai Luan watched, fascinated. Time stop felt like the world had gone mute. Nothing moved. He casually picked up the tweezers and tossed them upward. For 7 seconds, they hung in the air like a fly trapped in amber, frozen mid-arc. When the hand crossed the 7th symbol, the tweezers snapped back to physics. They jerked upward a fraction as the invisible restraint released, then began to fall. Bai Luan's reflexes were lightning quick. He flicked his wrist and caught them smoothly in his palm. The lab's sounds flooded back. The machines, the flow of liquid, the tiny theater of dust in the light. A small note, usable once every 24 hours. He'd gotten a gold-tier strange item from a single casual reassembly. He hadn't expected it, but now he had another trump card. He tucked the pocket watch close to his chest, then took out his phone to check the time. It was night. It had been morning when he came in. Science will make you forget to eat and sleep, he thought, and grinned despite himself. 19. How can I have a good mouth like this? I woke up, went for a run, then clocked in at the supply distribution station. I worked as a gardener in the botanical garden, tending exotic plants and teaching the inspiration shrooms to make bizarre noises. Mambo, inspiration shroom, cuckoo gaga, sleeping banana monkeys, you name it. After that, I'd head to the lab to tinker with gadgets and see what oddities the oddity forger spat out. When I got hungry, I went to the kitchen to prepare my 3 daily meals. Every so often, a Heita puppet would show up and drag me off with Bai Luan to open new enterprises. And just like that, 3 years vanished. In those 3 years, I'd super-evolved my cooking. Heita's kitchen had any ingredient you could imagine, so I sharpened my skills to a frightening degree and enjoyed 3 years of free, quality meals. Bai Luan grew back to his original height and amassed a ridiculous collection of oddities. Most of them were useless, like a pixel-style pair of sunglasses I made out of boredom that automatically adjusted to the wearer's prescription, handy but not life-changing, or an umbrella that actually worked as a parachute if you opened it mid-fall, marginally useful. After a while, I learned the layout and facilities at Heita's place so well that my job options weren't limited to gardening anymore. If a task existed, I could pick it up after trying once. I hardly ever saw the Heita puppet. Heita herself? I'd only met her the first day I arrived in this world and hadn't seen her since. I figured she'd lost interest in me. Herta was the type to latch onto something and then discard it the moment she bored of it. Fine by me. No one was about to fire me, and with Herta not looking, my lies wouldn't be exposed. 3 years had taught me how to survive here. The only thing better than Herta's place was the Astral Express. Lately, I'd been saving credit points to buy a spaceship so I could chase the train the next time it rolled. If only there were a direct ticket to the Astral Express, but the train roamed the universe along silver rails and no one knew its next stop. I suspected it was still lying at Himeko's old home, but I checked the easiest way. I opened my phone, typed Astral Express relaunch into the search bar, and scrolled the results. All fluff. The mystery of Akivilli's fall you don't know, daily expanding knowledge, the legacy of the Trailblaze Path, Astral Express, ghost stories, urban legends. No real news about a restart. I'd come a little early. That wasn't terrible. It meant I had time to save. Herta didn't pay a salary, and if anyone heard me say that they'd probably bury me in spit, loads of people considered working for Herta the dream of their lives. I wasn't bragging. Herta's miscellaneous items were priceless, but I had no reliable way to convert them into credit points. Buyers were rare, and the ones brave enough to inquire would see the return address, Miss Herta's house, and think it was a prank. They'd blacklist me, so my mountain of gold couldn't be turned into credit. I found other ways. Using Herta's facilities, I reproduced instrumental tracks from my past life, sang the ones I could, and used AI voices for the rest. I spent hours tuning in the little black room until the tracks sounded indistinguishable from real voices. I covered songs like Nunchucks, Blue and White Porcelain, The Only One, The Brightest Star in the Night Sky. If I could bring a taste of Honkai Star Rail to this world, why not? Then I took on advertising with my popular account, reskinned small games from my previous life and released them. Plants vs. Zombies with the Swarm disaster as the backdrop, a Jump King starring Aha, and other parody projects. I started a short video account showing the magical plants and my cooking. Between the music, games, and videos there was decent income, but nowhere near enough for a spaceship. People accused my short videos of being AI-made. Potatoes the size of houses, expressive pumpkins, color-changing roses, too unreal, they said. So I set a camera in the botanical garden and live-streamed it 7 days straight. No breaks. That crushed the skeptics. Many deleted their accounts and scurried off, and a few generous viewers donated during the marathon stream. Watching my credit points climb, I couldn't help grinning like an idiot. Life's easier when you don't worry about food. Then my phone pinged. Herta, come here quickly. The Herta puppet hadn't contacted me in ages. An urgent tone meant something big. I put the phone away and felt my tuxedo ripple. Nanobots embedded in the fabric, using mimicry tech, surged and assembled behind me. In minutes, a flight unit formed. With a thought, the wings popped out and 4 thrusters spat blue flames. I shot into the sky, weaving between buildings, dodging obstacles, and landed at Herta's location with an Iron Man pose. The flight pack disassembled into nanobots and clung back to my clothes. I scanned the area and quickly spotted the Herta puppet. Miss Herta, my greeting died in my throat. Herta herself stood there beside the puppet, a prominent figure I hadn't seen in years. Miss Herta, you're here too? She glanced at my flight unit. Did you make that yourself? I offered a sheepish laugh. Just a little gadget. Made it for fun. Showing off tech to Herta felt exactly like teaching a fish to swim. It hardly impressed. To smooth the awkwardness, I asked, "What did you need me for?" "I collected too many trinkets and had nowhere to put them," she said. "I planned to build something to store them, and then I realized, this is the Herta space station. You mentioned that once. Congratulations. 3 years proves you're not faking your destiny site." For a beat, I didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. The good news, my little prophet of destiny ruse hadn't been exposed as a lie. The bad news, Herta's interest in me had suddenly reignited. She must have dredged up the memory of the guy who talked about a space station and tracked me down. "Since what you said was true, tell me now," she pressed. "How much do you know about that space station? What does it look like? How is it designed? What's its internal structure? Can you draw its blueprint?" She fired the questions like a machine gun. I wanted to cry. MiHoYo's description of the Heita space station in the game had been little more than flavor text and a model, hardly an engineering plan. I wasn't an aerospace engineer. I was a player who'd peeked at a game asset 3 years ago. Where was I supposed to find an actual blueprint for Heita's space station? The stone I'd picked up 3 years ago had finally fallen back on my own foot. I was just a gamer. How could I possibly know the structural blueprint of a space station? And nobody had mentioned that playing a game would demand expertise in aerospace design. What was I supposed to do? I'm not a genius at all. I'm not a genius at all. The thought repeated itself like a cracked record, but Bai Luan kept his voice steady. This wasn't the first time he'd managed to baffle Heita. After erudition ascended to godhood, there'd been only 80-something geniuses. Watch him trick her again. Miss Heita. His tone was casual. 3 years ago, I told you that even if you can see destiny, you shouldn't meddle with it too much. Are you trying to trick me with butterfly effect rhetoric? Heita asked. No, Bai Luan answered. My silence isn't to brush you off. It's to avoid interfering with you. He spread his hands. You're the one who wants to build the space station. It's not because I foresaw it that you should do it. The important thing is you, not the prophecy. If I told you everything, wouldn't I in some way change your original intention? Heita thought for a moment, arms crossed, then shot back. So in the version of fate you saw, you didn't speak and I still built the space station. How does it matter whether you told me or not? A hair's breadth can be a chasm, Bai Luan said. Prophecy barely nudges the short term, but it's huge in the long run. The present you wants to act because the present you wants to act. If you come to depend on prophecy, your motivation becomes, the future me did this, so it must be right. He looked directly at her, neither servile nor proud. Wouldn't that make you more a puppet of fate than yourself? They stared at each other for a long beat. Then Heita smiled and unexpectedly said, You've gotten taller since we first met. That wasn't the point, Bai Luan thought helplessly, but he smiled back. And you haven't changed at all, still bright, young, and beautiful as ever. So if you tell me too much, I become a puppet of fate. You don't want to talk because you don't want to make me one. Heita's voice was flat. Then she added, Then help build Heita space station yourself. You won't have to tell me about it, and you can still help. Bai Luan blinked. That was a neat solution. He opened his mouth to protest. Miss Heita, I'm half-baked at best. Is it okay for someone like me to take on a project this big? But found no argument that would hold. She'd read the puppet's report on him, a task mastered in 1 day at best, 7 at worst. The space station was harder, so she gave him a month. Can you do it? She pressed. Who are you looking down on? I'll build it for you to see, he snapped, all bravado. No problem at all. Good, take out your phone. Heita sent a friend request. He accepted. If there's any progress, contact me directly, she said, then left. The weight of the Heita space station landed on him like a boulder. He'd agreed with swagger and confidence, but now that it was time to deliver, his head throbbed. He was still saving up for a spaceship. After this, maybe he could build one himself. No. Bai Luan slapped his cheeks and forced himself up. Complaining wouldn't help. It was only a space station. He'd grind it out. Little black room, activate. For the next month, he lived in hell mode. He begged the system for the Heita space station map from his previous life's game, using the in-game model as a starting point. The MiHoYo map, as it turned out, was a very rough sketch, only a reference. He lacked real technical knowledge, orbital dynamics, launch vehicle thrust, modular architecture, closed-loop life support, materials engineering. Fortunately, Heita in the little black room became his teacher. He had to make up for 3 easygoing years of slacking. The intensity of study was crushing. There were days the pressure nearly broke him. He had to go to the botanical garden just to breathe. For a while, he even developed a kind of fear of the little black room. Entering it felt like going to prison, but the 1-month deadline did not care. Human potential, it turned out, was limitless when pushed by a deadline. After a month of near-suicidal effort, Bai Luan finally finished the design blueprint for Heita space station. When the file was complete, he cried, not with joy so much as the exhausted wail of someone who'd been worked to death. Who understood? Who knew what he'd gone through? He howled at the ceiling of the little black room, swore at aerospace, promised himself he'd join the Astral Express the instant it resumed service, because if he kept like this, he'd keel over. He sent the blueprint to Heita and collapsed into bed, falling into a sleep deeper than physical fatigue could explain. When he woke, it was already afternoon. His phone had buzzed multiple times. An ominous feeling crawled up his spine. Heita has received your file. You made this in a month? You strolled around the botanical garden for a month and casually made this? Why aren't you replying? Wait. Reply when you wake up. She'd sent a photo, him fast asleep in bed. He sat bolt upright. Heita had been there? He rubbed his eyes and typed, guilty and exhausted. I pulled an all-nighter, overworked and overslept. Heita, I truly underestimated you. To produce a blueprint of this caliber in such a short time, a month was still too long. Bai Luan stared at the message. Ms. Heita, are you serious? I nearly studied myself to death, and you think a month was too long? Is that a human thing to say? I thought I'd give you time to familiarize yourself with the field. I didn't expect you to hand me a finished, mature design, as if it'd been built for years. I retrieved your activity logs. They show that for over 80% of your observable time this month, you were in the botanical garden, the kitchen, or other non-work areas. You were chatting with mushrooms, researching recipes, or spacing out. Slacking off dominated your time. And yet you completed the design using only fragmented time. And you say you weren't slacking off? Only then did Bai Luan realize how obvious it must have looked. To anyone monitoring him in the real world, his month had been a parade of botanical strolls, staring at the refrigerator, and long blinking sessions in a corner. Perfectly legitimate mental breaks, but unmistakable slacking to an outside observer. And there was no way to explain it with, I was inside the little black room. Because who would believe a claim about a system-given hidden study chamber? Worse, Heita seemed convinced his genius came from innate ability, not from the system's help. If she thought he was that efficient, she'd throw him at every future impossible task. His recently reclaimed leisure, botanical garden afternoons, recipe experiments, aimless downtime, would be gone. No, come back. He felt a tiny panic bloom. Ms. Heita, was it too late to confess? Actually, I'm not a genius at all. A message glowed in his system window. This story tells us that lying harms both oneself and others. Bai Luan blinked and stared speechlessly at the system's dialogue box. Indeed, the joys and sorrows of humans and systems were not the same.